Morning, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. So trying to figure out, like you can see, I've sealed the painting. I posted a photograph of the painting so you can get a better sense than what maybe the video is showing you. I will, when I'm finished, post a full resolution image, not a small Facebook one, but a substantial one. We'll set up a link for you so you can actually go and see what the painting looks like. We'll do close-up shots and some other stuff like that. But you basically see, once I sealed everything, how the painting is actually, it's really coming along. The head is just about done. Just a little bit of coloration in it, a little bit of detail, and I say detail, all I mean is a few sharp marks and bold contrast jumps, and that head's done. I could probably leave the shirt the way it is. Same with the collar. The jacket's going to get a little bit of darker value, but that's probably it. There's no highlights in it. It's just going to be some darker shades to really kind of explain the sleeve and some of the bolder folds, maybe a little bit in the lapel. I might have to put a little bit of reflection or a little bit of light in the lapel because it's silk and it's a little bit more reflective than the rest of the jacket. So I do pretty much every morning before I come in, I try to figure out what I'm going to work on. And so today, I'm going to try to knock out the majority of the background. I'm not going to put in the flutes in the column. That I'll do next week. But at this point, I think I want to kind of push the background to where it belongs as a final value and color. Back in here as well. And I also want to manage the flag. I want to start pulling up all of the lights in the flag, the stars. Right now, the flag is really kind of set back away from him. But as he's coming up and he's becoming more solid, this stuff is starting to feel more and more kind of like tattered and kind of in pieces in the background. I want to start to solidify it a little bit. I'm not going to bring these things up to the level of him. This stuff is basically just going to get coated in a glaze so that you can see through it, but it's all going to get pushed back. It's going to get darkened against his head, pulling his head forward, and then the flag is going to stay dark, but we're going to start adding color to it. Like the whites will get a little bit lighter, but the reds are going to get rich red in them. The value will stay dark, so it'll stay back, but the reds will start to make it a little bit more prominent. We'll drop some lighter value to define the stars a little better. Again, I'm not looking to make this sharp like him. I'm trying to utilize, at the very least, edges to maintain this as being further away than this. If these edges, which are nice, they're starting to get sharper, start to look like these edges, by me tightening up these marks, everything's going to start to feel like, instead of having some distance, it's going to feel like it's on the same plane. So I want to leave these edges intact and then start building up some of the color and value to make it feel more solid in the space. Again, I want to unify the flag with the background here, so I've got to take this, and when I cover this, I've got to spill this over into the flag, and that's going to keep this more prominent and let the flag kind of pull into the background. So the idea is, I'm going to show it to you in here. If I have dark against dark, these connect and they don't feel, right? If I separate this, this feels connected. This doesn't. Here I've got some separation, the value is a big jump, the color is a big jump, but here it's not so much. Like these shadows in the ear are actually the background color. I'm allowing him to jump away and connect in different places. When I put the hair in, he's going to be more like this than, this right now feels really light. But what I want to do is I want to connect him or stitch him to the background with a value in him that's similar to the value in the background, and then I want to separate him in other places with a value on him that is dramatically different than the background. So this is dark against light, light against dark, right? And I can find neutral places where I can connect him or separate him. And so the idea is that if he's entirely distinct from the background, meaning like everything about him here is darker than the background, and everything here is lighter than the background, he pulls away and starts to look like a cutout. We don't want that. We want it to feel like he's part of the space. So we have places that connect and disconnect. The collar connects to this, the jacket connects to this, but the jacket here and the collar here disconnect. We've got things in here for the ear that fall in with the background, and then we've got things to separate it. This is lighter, this is about the same. This is lighter right now, but it's going to get darker, so it'll more line up. This light against this light is relatively similar, and then we start to get more of a separation in here. Light against dark, light against dark, light against dark. Dark against dark starts to stitch him against the background again. So I'm basically pushing and pulling him. Some parts of him are attached to the background, some are pulled away. Right now, the flag is just kind of sitting here in this space. What I want to do is I want to separate this from the background so it pulls forward, but not as close as him. I also want to stitch this to the background on this side. And so what I'm going to do is right now I've got all these variations, not just values, but colors against something completely, distinctly different value and color. So we've talked about these peer relationships where it's a value match of a different color allows these things to play nicely. It makes them feel connected. If we have the same color in two distinctly different values, they play nicely. And if we have two distinctly different colors of the same value, they play nicely. In places where we want to connect something, what I want to do is I want to unify this color with this color. Right now the values are close, but it's too much of a color jump. So you'll see, I'm going to fill this with one color, and then I'm going to spill it out into the flag, taking over this edge of the flag, letting it dissolve into the flag. I'm then going to use lighter shades and bolder colors to pull a portion of the flag forward. Stitch it to the background here, separate it here. And that's going to give the flag more prominence, it's going to make it feel more solid, but not allow it to become a cutout against the background. And if you remember early on, I intentionally made this edge soft, blurred it out into the background and obscured it. Like you can see even down in here, the background actually spills into the flag. I did that intentionally knowing that I was eventually going to pull this background shade in a glaze over this edge of the flag. So again, I'm going to stitch this edge to the background so the flag feels anchored in the space, and then I'm going to pull it forward in here, in this space, so that it comes up, but not to the level of where he is. I still want it to feel like there's distance between him and the flag. Right now I have a very soft edge here, which I'm probably going to wind up strengthening a little bit as I work. And it'll probably be, when I do the jacket, I'll probably glaze this edge in to make it stronger. I don't think I'll do it utilizing the flag, though I might. I'll see how it's going when I work. I'll probably pull the edge down, I'll probably do a couple of stripes against the jacket and see how they look. And if they look good, then I'll just continue that trend around. Generally speaking, when I do this, I prefer to use the lighter shades to create the edge. I don't like, the obvious go-to is to use the darker paint and establish the edge and leave this soft. But in nature, we actually perceive the light and the light ending, not the shadow. What we would see is, this isn't shadow, but it's dark. It feels that way. We don't see the shadow kind of come up and end the light. We see the light end at the edge of the shadow. And again, there's a very minor distinction in there, but the visual impression of the light coming and ending at an edge is more natural than the darker or the shadow coming up and creating the edge. Again, it seems like, well, what's the difference? The shadow making the edge or the light making the edge is the same, but it's actually not. So the light having a crisper edge looks different than the shadow having a crisper edge. And so, again, normally I like to use the light to create the edge. It just looks more natural. There's something more elegant about it and more natural. I'll see how it plays as I start to work. But I'm going to start by dealing in here, kind of dealing with this. Once I've got this edge dissolved, I'm going to work out in here as well, which is going to establish the head. I'm probably going to glaze in the gray of the hair as well because it's all going to be wet. So I may as well just get it done. And once that's in place and all of the stuff behind him is unified, then I'll pull out the flag. And you'll find, I'm even going to take some of this and spill into the flag in here. I don't want this portion of the flag to be completely empty of the colors that I'm going to put back in here, because I want the flag to feel like it is connected to the background. Okay? So I've just got to move this, make a little bit of room for myself. We did some cleaning in here the other day, so everything's been moved.
Question.
Yes.
The gold necklace looks enhanced since Wednesday. Did you glaze or seal it?
All I did was seal it. So all of the sunken in areas are now exactly what they would have been when I put them down and they were wet. So Daniel made a point to me, I'm not allowed to paint unless this is turned on and people are watching. So anything that looks different, it's just a matter of the painting being sealed. You can see the face is dramatically more refined. All it is this is what it looked like when I was painting, but it was kind of drying and frosting over while I was working. So I knew what I was doing, and so even through that, I knew what to do to get the effect that I was looking for. But now that it's sealed, you can see it's nice and solid. So I've created basically another version of this, and I'm just going to work over. I'm going to work over the background with this glaze.
Another question.
Yes.
How is the necklace attached to the lower medallion?
It's not at the moment. There's a chain in here which I kind of messed up, and I've got to put it back in. So at the moment, it's not actually connected. So you'll see I'm dropping in. I mean, it's basically the exact same color, very thin. I can still see through it, just a little bit. And I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to push it into the flag and try to take out some of this edge. Now I'm going to blend this out later on. So as much as I'm putting it down and it might feel heavy right now, it's not going to stay that way. I'll be knocking it down as I go. But when I put it in, I want to make sure that I have enough paint. I don't want to have to add paint later on. So I'd rather put too much and then push it around and take it away, rather than not have enough and have to add it later. Adding it always looks like repair work. It's very hard to get it to do what you want it to do if you don't get the paint down to start. And you can see, I mean, some of this edge, I may have to work in here. Some of the edge is maybe not as soft as I want it to be. Again, when this is made bolder, this will become less of a focal point. And again, this is just a little bit darker, not much. And I'm going to be doing quite a bit with this. It's not going to stay so simple. I'm going to be making some color changes, some temperature changes today in the background. Because the idea at this point is I'm trying to now push this as close to the finish line as I can possibly get it. So you can see this darker shade solidifies this space a little bit more. Right, again, even just coming up against this book defines the book better. Again, once I've got this all down, I'm just going to come up to the edge of the table here. That'll be my break point. Right, again, just this little bit pulls the book out, pulls the hand away. Right, it gives me a little bit more distance between the background and the figure. And again, I'll be able to wipe stuff out as I go. I don't mind covering things. The paint is basically transparent. and it's, when you put it down, like you can't see it there, but it's so rich, and it just glows. Even though it's like this kind of earthy brown, it glows.
It's actually glowing more in the camera.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Oh wow. Someone named Kevin Murphy just commented. Same name, and I'm an artist too.
Hey, Kevin. Welcome. Okay, just gonna figure out what I've got going on in here. So I wanted to get a little bit of a temperature shift. So I'm dropping some blue into this mixture. Again, just and all I did was drop a little bit of blue into the glaze mixture on the palette, and it allows me to create a space that feels shadowed without having the warm color attached to it. So I'll leave the warms down in here, but up in here, I can distinguish it. Back behind the book, I don't need it to pull away nearly so much. I'll probably get just the edge of this and then let it just dissolve down into here. I know the table is warm, and so it's going to wind up being almost an orangish color. So I don't want it to be. I can fade into those warmer colors and then let the orange kind of pop here. But up in here, this gives me a little bit of a separation, which is nice. Adds a little bit more depth to the painting because I'm now dealing in temperature shifts. And it's a minor. I mean, I shouldn't say that it's minor. It's actually not minor, but it adds quite a bit of life. It adds quite a bit of life by having that shift in temperature. And temperature, playing with temperatures is part of understanding color. And so here, like the table, there's actually quite a bit of this cooler tone here. The front of the table, here and here, will be warm, but I'm actually going to take this edge and I'm going to cool it down with the blue. That way I get blue against that warm later on. Well, it really kind of comes across as quite a bit of this table is cool. So that's pretty good. That gives me a nice separation. And then all I'm going to do is just kind of knock this stuff down. Take whatever edges are here away.
Question?
Yes.
Do you ever have a difficult time giving your paintings away after you've given so much of yourself to the process?
No, I don't do them for me, right? People come and they hire me to do these and they pay me for them. The painting is never mine. I don't ever perceive it as being my property. My job is to do the best job that I can for the client. I know where the painting's going when I'm done, and it's not my wall. So, so many people, they get tied up in this idea about the value of their painting. We've talked about this a little bit along the way as I've been working on this. Look, I mean, depending on what you do your art for, if you do your art to make a living, you don't have the luxury of thinking that way, right? You can think however you want while you're working, but when you're done, if you want to feed yourself with this is a commodity. It's no different than if you worked on an assembly line building sneakers or cars, or you don't think of the car or the product when you're finished as being personal, but like you put just as much effort, time and energy and whatever into your job if you're doing your job conscientiously, right? This is work. It's work. Yeah, it's better than standing on an assembly line for me, but to me, this is all about the client. I don't own the piece. All I'm doing is applying my skill to the best of my ability. That's all I'm doing. And when I'm finished, it goes out the door, and at no point did it belong to me. I can love the process. I can feel that the job, the work that I'm doing is something elevated, that it's a calling, it's whatever it is you want to make it, right? You can turn this into whatever you want it to be in your own head, in your own studio. But the moment that you sign your name to it, it becomes a commodity. It's a hammer, it's bricks, it's tires for a car. It's just something to put out onto the market that you sell to make enough money to feed yourself, to put a roof over your head so that you can do more of these. That's all it is. And so no, for me, I don't think of it that way. Personally, I think it's a dangerous way of thinking if you want to make a living at this. It's counterproductive. You really can't afford to think of it in those terms if it's about making a living. Right, so I've got some stuff going on in here. I want to kind of shape. Since I'm doing this temperature shift, I want to try to capture some ins and outs on this. So this is actually, right, so I'm just trying to make sense of what I have here. I've got a few landmarks that I can still make out a little bit. Right, and I'm looking at all these landmarks in here, stars, and trying to figure out where each thing falls so that I can create this shape, because this is a doorway. This is a doorway in here, and above there's some what do you call it? Molding and some other stuff. Some beautiful. There's a column in here with a capital on top of it. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting that shape. This is kind of in here like this. It's there. This will be here. And again, it doesn't have to be. It's not that it doesn't have to be perfect. Let me not say it that way. Again, like I always try to make sure that I use language that if you came in today and you've not seen anything else and you've not heard me talking, that you don't walk away with an impression that is not correct. When I say that it doesn't have to be perfect, that means that when I put this down, it's not going to stay sharp like this, right? It's going to be softened. And so when I put it down, it doesn't have to be a finished painting at this stage. I'm going to push it around and knock it down, and there's going to be other stuff that goes on with it. So you can see I'm putting it down where it goes. I'm going to tweak the shapes and make sure they're right, and then I'm going to knock it down and soften it. So it's not refined like the face, but it does have to be laid down with care. Catch me saying all the time, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, or that's good enough. When I say it's good enough, that means that it's well over the hurdle of where it needs to be wildly successful. And so I do try to make the distinction, again, for people who are coming in that have not been around through the entire process so far. I just want to make sure that I'm not giving an impression that I accept things as being good enough when they just barely clear the hurdle of being acceptable. Good enough for me is borderline perfection. And anybody who's here at the school knows that about me. Like, I don't cut corners. And so here, I'm just dropping in some of these shadows. These shadows are not the same temperature as even though there's very little light back there, they're not the same temperature as the light. And so I'm utilizing the cool paint here to start establishing some of that. I really can't see. Right, some of the stuff, I can't even really see marks anymore. Like I'm basically just placing these things where it looks like they go. This is all going to be very subtle back in here. So as long as I'm describing the column, I'll be okay. I'll be okay with it in that way. I just want to make sure that, like, when I get this column in, that it doesn't get lost. I don't want it to disappear into this shape back in here. I want to make sure that I am pulling it out. And I'm not going to be pulling it out now. It'll come out later in the process. Right now I'm just trying to establish the finished value or general value of what's going on here. And again, I'm looking at shadows, not the individual shades of things, but what is in the shadows and what is not. I'm not concerned with how light or dark something is, if it's a different color. I am just trying to state what is a shadow and what is a light at the moment. It's really my only concern. These are lights, these are shadows. A little bit of distinction in here. So just cleaning up, again, a little bit at a time. I'm nudging my way to the shapes that I want. I'm not going to leave something in here that is not correct, if I can see that it's not correct. So, lots of little ins and outs at the moment. Again, you can see I'm just looking around for landmarks. I'm counting stars and working my way across, just trying to figure out where each thing goes. So even like I'm utilizing the height of his eyes for the bottom of this element on the column. Makes sense where everything goes. So this is actually looking good. So we're looking good. Just replacing some of the original brown that I put down, that I've kind of wiped away. But now let's just step back and take a look and see how the shapes look. Yeah. So I've got it's got a nice structural feel to it when I step back. I don't know how it looks in the camera, but it's got a nice structural feel. I got a sense of the columns and above the doorway. And again, it's dark. I'm making it darker in the painting than in the photograph. It's dark and it's meant to fall away. The level of value here is meant to counterbalance the weight of this dark jacket and the space that it takes up. Just looking for things going on in here where this cooler shadow is a better fit. Again, there's a doorway in here and there's a bunch of stuff going on in this back room. I don't want to ignore it. Even though I'm not describing it in great detail, I don't want to leave it out either. Again, you know, when you do something like this, you have to assume that this door was left open for a reason, especially if you don't know what the subject matter is. You have to assume the door was left open for a reason, and the things that are in here, they're relevant. Maybe in a very small way, but if you don't know, you put them in. Like in this case, I didn't take the photograph, so I have to make assumptions that everything here has some reason for being here. And so I don't want to just discount something. Again, I'm taking artistic license and making this one thing for the sake of him, but I'm not leaving things out. Pulling some of this cooler shade down in here and allowing a warm edge against, so I made the table cool. do me a favor, just check. I just want to make sure they can see this. I don't need the camera moved, but I don't know how far over they can see. This is in view?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've made the table cooler with the blue, and I put the blue up in here. Now what I'm doing is I'm dissolving this, but I'm leaving some of the warm shade right at the edge so that I get a little bit of separation. I don't want anything to jump, so it's just going to be very subtle, and this warm in here and up in here, which this has some of the blue on it, but not as much as these other areas. So this feels warm compared to the blue. This feels warm compared to the blue. It's sandwiched between, and that warmth helps to connect it to the rest of the painting. The jacket is relatively cool as well. It's actually cooler than what I'm putting in here. So this helps to connect this cool with this cool, these warms with these warms. And so, again, I'm trying to now, I wasn't worried about temperatures so much before, but I am paying very close attention to them now as I'm moving the painting closer to completion. So I'm just going to start pulling some of this down, softening, making sure I don't have any blobs of paint floating around here before I go in with a fan brush and start really taking it down. Again, if I wanted to, I could leave all these brush strokes intact. Again, this is one of those things, like, this is not, what I'm doing doesn't limit me to painting only realistic stuff. Like, I could, or even refining everything. I could leave these brush strokes almost the way they are, or I could pretty them up and leave them as decorative elements inside of the painting if I chose to do it. It's not what I'm choosing to do, but I have the option of doing that. I don't have to clean these things up and make them and really refine them. I leave them just the way they are, leave them with all of the character of the original mark. And as I said very early on, that's not really the way it's not how my paintings look. I prefer them to be more refined than that. And so I'll go in and I'll knock all of this down and neutralize my brush strokes along the way. But you can see I'm already taking them out. It's already starting to smooth out and unify and become kind of big bulk shapes rather than having all this kind of stuff swimming in here. And there'll be some little variations in here, darker and lighter areas where you'll have cool blues sitting on top of warm browns, and you'll get a little bit of a vibration in there. Not much, but I don't want it over here, like a little bit. When we talk about vibration, vibration is when you play complementary colors against each other. You get the painting kind of the way your eyes take in the information, your eyes kind of, you get an impression of what we call vibration. It almost makes the painting feel like it's humming. And if you've ever stood in front of, have you ever seen photographs of the Mona Lisa? They don't do it. But if you stand in front of the original, you can almost hear the vibration on the wall. I mean, it's an incredible thing to stand in front of that painting. I never really understood that painting's charm until I saw the original. And then I was like, yeah, there it is. It's an experience to stand in front of that painting. There's no real other way of saying it. You don't get an impression of that painting by seeing photographs. So here I'm kind of playing with the edge of the flag, kind of unifying it in with the background over here, trying to take it out in the places that I can. And I've got to find landmarks that will allow me to do that. I'm not going to break up the whole edge, but I do want to break up some of it if I can. And again, this side of the flag is shadowed, and it's darker than what's over here, so I have a little bit of room to kind of play and drop this in. And even in doing this, I'm pulling some of this over into the flag and trying to unify this with this edge of the flag, and then I'll pull this away. This I can probably leave. And again, so you can see I'm having to make like serious decisions at this point. with each one of these things, because I'm really starting to push the painting towards completion. And again, I'll be knocking a lot of this stuff down. It's not going to be staying nearly as strong as it is. There's some beautiful stuff going on, but the goal isn't to leave it where it is. I need to be able to make out more of the flag here. But again, just a little bit at a time, trying to explain what's going on here. Again, like I've left this stuff in such pieces up until now. I've now got to start solidifying it. And so I'm making decisions as to which things need to be defined at this point, and which things I can leave exactly the way they were. Which things need clear distinction, and which ones can be subtly hinted at. As I'm doing this, I keep stepping back now. These are big shapes. And as I step back so I can see them, when I stand up close, it's just a whole bunch of marks. When I step back, I can actually see how they come together, what they're doing to the painting as a whole. And I need to have access to the big picture at this point. I can't work in small spaces. I'm now dealing with these very large areas that need a distance for me to be able to make sense of them and see how everything here relates to itself, but also to how it relates to the rest of the painting. I've got to be able to take that in as I'm going here.
I guess
over there. Can you grab this for me? Thank you. So I'm going to start going in and knocking some of this stuff down with a fan brush.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, and again, I've been telling you guys from the very beginning how dangerous fan brushes are. I use them a lot. I shouldn't say that I use them a lot. I use them just the right amount. Nothing more, nothing less. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can use a fan brush without it jeopardizing my painting. But this is going to allow me to knock down any of the excess liquid that this glaze is made of. It's going to allow me to neutralize some things that I don't want to be so prominent. It's going to allow me to really just kind of hold together this harsh block in.
Question.
Yes.
Is there a block where you talk more about creating a vibration?
I don't talk very much about vibration. When I'm teaching color, I don't talk about it. It's not something you need to worry about for quite some time. You know, it's one of these things like I could explain it to you, you would drown in it. If you learn how to match the colors the way you see them, in the places where you would get vibration, you'll have it, and in the places the photograph doesn't have it, you won't have it. Much like everything else that we teach, so when you're dealing in like value, if you know how, or value and edge, if you know how they work, you can create the impression of depth and distance and all kinds of other stuff by kind of toggling those two things. Softening an edge makes something feel further away. Giving something less contrast makes it feel further away. Putting those two things together really pushes it off into the distance, but only if you have something up front that has greater contrast and sharper edges, right? So it's how they play against each other. Vibration is the same thing, but it's simple and it's complex all at the same time. You have to be able to mix paint properly on a canvas without one thing contaminating another, which you learn during the process of application of grayscale and then application of color, right? The way we make our gradients by step-down values and step-down colors, we're not mixing a shadow into a light and destroying both. We have a shadow and we have a light, and then we create values that fit in between to marry them. And so if you have a shadow that's cool and a light that's warm, and the coloration of them in the photograph would yield vibration. If you match the colors and do the gradients the way you've been shown, you'll get vibration. You don't need to know about it, right? It happens naturally if you're color selecting properly, mixing properly, and applying properly. Now, right now we have 8 blocks in the program. There is an intent to have 4 more. There's no time for it right now. We will get around to it. But the 9th video is actually atmosphere, and vibration would be dealt with there. So we'd be talking about how to create the impression of haze, like or fog, or even seeing somebody through fine lace, like a hand through lace, things like that. Like, how do you create those impressions, those atmospheric things? Temperature is part of that. It would be in block 3 if it were important for what you're doing, right? You'll learn to see it as you do things. As you go to museums and look at old masters' work, you'll see it, and it's just a matter of figuring out how it works. Eventually, we'll get around to block 9, and I will describe it in greater detail, but not right now. If I thought that it were critical to your development, it would have been in block 3. I don't think that it is. If you do everything the way you've been shown in our program, I'm assuming you're a student, but if you do everything the way that we show you in the program, you will find that there is natural vibration in some of the images, and not in all of them, because some of them, just the way we shot them, the coloration, they don't vibrate. We're not dealing in complements. Here, I am particularly manipulating it for that purpose. But again, it's not just education. 30 years I've been doing this professionally. I know exactly what I want, and I know why I want it. I don't want vibration over there because I can get vibration over there. I want it there for a reason, okay? And I want it to be, so you can have vibration and then you can have vibration. I don't want it to be like over the top. I want it very subtle back in there. And all that's gonna do is it's gonna keep the place from falling flat and feeling static. That's all it's gonna do, not much more. It's not gonna draw attention. It's just gonna have a little bit more life and not feel frozen because of the temperature shift. But again, we do talk about temperature, particularly I think in block 6 in speed painting. I talk about temperature, but I also talk about it in block 3 when we start making our shadows in color, when we use black to create our shadows. The black cools down the light. The light is warm because everything in those photographs is lit with a warm light source. We add black, which is a cool. So not only are we stripping away color through the addition of black and making the thing darker, which are two things that make it a shadow, the black also cools the color down. That is the beginning of creating vibration, okay? But again, color theory, there's so much to it. And I can show you some things on application. There are better resources, which I do talk about for getting an in-depth understanding, but you need to get comfortable in a chair and plan to be spending, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours reading, and then hundreds of hours applying, okay? It's a very complex thing. So we talk about how perspective, like linear perspective, You look down a street, and if you know what you're seeing, you can see that the buildings get smaller as they recede. You can see that that basically there's a vanishing point. You can make sense of it if you took the time to look. There's also a mathematical formula that will tell you what's going on there as well. You learn by seeing it with your eyes. After you've learned to see it with your eyes and you're able to reproduce it, then you go to a text and get the mathematical formulas to make better sense of it. Not to learn how to do it, but to make better sense of what you're seeing. When you paint figures, you start by painting figures, not by learning anatomy. The anatomy has no value, and in fact, the amount of information in anatomy is probably 100 million times what you need to be able to paint anatomy. You don't need the vast majority of what is in an anatomy book in order to be able to paint what you see if you know how to see and you know how to paint. So we learn to see and we learn to paint, and then when we get to a point where we can't make sense of certain things because we don't understand the underlying structure, we then crack open a book on anatomy for that purpose. We develop our skills further by learning what's under the skin. And the reason that I say, like an anatomy book, there are muscles that are so thin, they're like tracing paper. You see them in an anatomy book, but they're not visible on the surface. Your skin is thicker than the actual muscle, so you don't see them. But because you know they're there, you overstate them. You search so hard to find them, and you put them in even though they're not there. And so that's why I say, like, learn to paint it first, then go to the anatomy book for extra information. Same with temperature. Don't drown yourself in a search for vibration through temperature. It's not needed. You can create beautiful, beautiful paintings without any understanding of that, as long as you have good reference and you're matching your reference and applying your paint without creating mud. So again, don't worry about it. We do touch on it a little bit, but it will be dealt with, not in great depth, but to a greater degree later on as we expand on the program. Right, I always worry about, people, as they're learning, they'll see something new and it'll be really cool. And they'll focus in on it. Like, as an example, like I'll have people go come to my studio years ago, and when I'm painting skin, and they'll spend so much time looking at the palette to see, like, what color. And there's no education there. The education is what I'm doing with the colors up here. And I described this earlier, like this flesh tone, these colors, these values, these edges only exist in this painting on this face, in this space. Put him in another room, change the lighting the slightest bit, the colors that I mixed for him become obsolete. So if you're watching the palette trying to get an understanding of what colors to mix for skin, there's no education there. The education is in understanding that this skin only works in this painting. If I took this away, it doesn't, from this background, if I put a green background in, this skin would look ridiculous. It only looks right in this space, meaning in this environment in the painting. And so, again, a lot of these things will like, how do you paint flesh? How do you paint flesh? Well, there's no such thing. There is no such thing as a flesh tone, right? I can tell you a couple of formulas for a basic Caucasian flesh tone under neutral daylight. But that's useless to you the moment you take the subject out of neutral daylight. So the formula kind of falls apart once you start putting the person in an environment. I talked about this earlier. You take a person with pale white skin and drop them into a swamp. Their skin tones, when you mix them, are going to be green. They're going to look like pea soup. And you would never mix that as a flesh tone. But if you don't use those colors as flesh tones, the person's going to look like a cardboard cutout. So because the environment colors the skin, right? So again, none of these things stand alone, and don't bog yourselves down chasing after flesh tones or vibration, or learn to paint. Those things like flesh tones and vibration and all these other things, they are the natural result. You'll paint something and you'll realize something's not right, and when you kind of investigate, you'll find that vibration is missing. You won't know that it's vibration. You'll see colors that aren't lining up right. And then when you get them right, all of a sudden the painting will vibrate. You'll have done it without understanding that it's vibration, but you'll get it in your painting. Don't spend your time focusing on the wrong things. That's really what I'm trying to say. Stay with the basics. Vibration happens on its own if you do all the things right, as long as your reference material has it in there, as long as your subject matter has color shifts that create vibration. Don't worry about it. Get the fundamentals down. Right, and that's, again, going back to what I haven't said it in a while, so I guess it's time to say it again. What you're seeing here is theater. It's theater. You can't fathom the number of things that I'm calculating every second along the way with this painting. It might look like stuff you recognize, but try this at home and I can promise you it's not going to work. You are seeing a little bit of knowledge and 30 years of experience. The experience is what you're seeing. The fact that I know this color and that blue, in what percentage to put in there, how thin it has to be, and where to put it, and how far I can run the brush before it starts to break down and dissolve. And then when I take the fan brush, how much of this paint am I lifting and how much am I leaving? There's no way for me to explain that. I can't explain it even if I try. It's just too many calculations. I could probably spend 2 hours explaining a 1-inch area here. It's just too much to explain. The experience is beyond explanation. And that's the case with all painters. All painters who are painting at this level, they can't explain their experience. The problem is that most videos, most people when you watch them paint, experts, they don't distinguish between their experience and their knowledge. And so they think that with a few words describing what they're doing and you seeing it, it'll make sense. Because when they look at it, it makes sense. And if they watch someone else do it, it makes sense. But they already know how it works. So, simplicity. And remember that, like I'm talking about some of these things here, this is a performance. Granted, it yields a result for me, but it's a performance for you. It's not an education. Be careful about allowing that kind of thinking to creep in here. You're not going to get an education here. It might give you ideas about things to play with, but that makes my point. Some of these things might make sense to you, and you'll go home and you will experiment with them, and the experiment will yield experience. And so your idea, kind of spurred by what you see, then puts you in a place where you can play and play and play, earning the experience to then be able to manage something you saw here. But again, you might only get 1% of something. It makes you 1% better. But that doesn't mean you grasped everything that you saw. Okay, the whole point of doing this, I'm trying to explain as much as I can so that maybe you can glean a 1% thing and add it to what you do once you've played with it a little bit. All right, so even as I'm working with a fan brush, I am so delicate. I vary my strokes. Some are extremely delicate. I barely touch the canvas. Others, I'm kind of biting down into the paint to break edges up and to move them around. Remember, this has to be out of focus. I have to be very careful about creating razor sharp edges. But I also don't want to contaminate my browns with my blues. I want to maintain that temperature shift. And so I'm having to manage the edges to create that soft, out of focus feel, but at the same time, maintain some of the structure that I've built in to some of this stuff. I don't want it to just be a blur. I don't want it to just look like oatmeal in the background. I want it to have I want it to have some body to it and feel solid, but at the same time, not be in focus. And there's a lot of mixing what's on top into what's underneath in order to do that. And again, I also have the option of doing yet another pass. This is not the end of it necessarily. I will be able to go in and do more. So I don't have to push this over the finish line right now. All I have to do is get it closer to completion. If I can complete it in this stage, that's great. But I'm not in a rush to get there. And again, I may decide that some of this stuff in here is really cool. Maybe I leave it a little bit more abstract as I go and maybe refine some areas a little further. At the moment, I'm still just kind of pushing paint around, trying to neutralize some of what I put in, make something, again, I'm not just looking for precision, I'm looking for pretty. I'm looking for areas that'll be like eye candy in the final painting. So, I don't want to just wipe out. I don't want to just bury stuff or blend away everything that's here as I wipe stuff out. I want to be thoughtful about what these strokes look like in the painting. Do they look pretty? Do they add character? If I leave a slightly sharper edge or a little bit of that pink showing through, how does that look? Right? I'm taking all of that into account as I'm working, thinking about edges dropping off. So I'm thinking sharp edges, graded edges. How sharp? How graded? What do they look like in the painting? I can wipe out, like if I want to establish this edge, I can wipe out a little bit of the background. But I'm slowly working this up, moving things around, manipulating the painting. And again, just a little bit at a time, trying to nudge everything until it does what I need it to do back in here. And again, take that edge down, it's nice and soft now. Again, at the moment I'm using a small fan brush because it gives me more control, but I will move to a bigger fan brush once I've got everything knocked out. The bigger fan brush is clumsier, and it is going to be less refined in how it moves the paint around. It'll move less paint, but it is going to be less refined. And so I want to make sure that as I'm doing this, I am not, I'm taking down the paint so that that when I apply the clumsy brush, the bigger one, that it's not making a mess, right? So I'm trying to do as much of the kind of knock things down and neutralize the paint to the best of my ability, because again, this is all very wet. Just try to neutralize anything that would become a problem, so that when I go with the big fan brush, I can just kind of smooth everything out. I don't want to use the big fan brush to level it all out. I just want to kind of polish the surface with the big fan brush. So most of my work is being done with the small one. Again, it's a bit more aggressive, and I'm gonna knock this edge down. I'm gonna dissolve this edge. And again, like you'll see, I'm not doing one thing to completion and then kind of moving on. I'm kind of pushing everything a little bit at a time and then going around the painting and bringing everything to that level. You see me constantly cleaning my brush. Again, like these edges are very sharp. The intent is to not have any sharp edges back here. So I do have to go over every edge and break it down. Trying to keep things that are meant to be straight, relatively straight. And again, it may even be that as I get further into this, that I accept a certain number of brush strokes back in here. Again, I've got they're very subtle, but there are strokes in here that are nice. And so leaving some of them intact might not be a bad thing. Again, as I'm working, I'm making decisions about that. I'll slowly work my way to a point and then stop, right? So if I get to a point and say, wow, that looks really nice, I like the feel of it, even if I was going to do more, I might stop right there and just let it be, and that'll become the final version of those areas, rather than maybe going in and doing another pass to refine further. And again, part of it is I'm just looking for beauty. I'm looking to create something really, really beautiful and elegant. And if I hit that point, nothing worse than hitting it, knowing you've got something beautiful, and then feeling like, well, you know, I decided I was going to do more, so I'm going to do more. And kind of taking away what makes something really nice. And again, you see, I am stepping back constantly. So that upper corner is actually looking really nice. There's a lot of dimension in it. I could wipe out and put in a few, just by wiping away, I could get the impression of some highlights. And I think that would be good. The flag on this side dissolves into the background, which is good. I do need to knock down this edge of this brown rolling over. Don't want it overtaking the flag. So I do need to soften that a bit. I'm going to use one of the brushes that I was applying with. This one's clean, there's nothing on it, but it's the same brush I was putting the paint down with. And I'm just going to like break up this edge. I'm going to allow some of these browns to just kind of roll over into here. But the idea is that I'm trying to get rid of the edge. You can see the whites are still peeking through, but they're going to feel more connected to the background than to this side of the flag. I'll be able to hint or put little highlights into them later on. It was my intention to do the flag today, but I have a feeling because of this, I'm going to have to hold off. I don't want to have these browns contaminating the colors that I drop in here. And so I have a feeling I'm just going to do the background and then maybe I'll work on something else. Right, and the idea is I want the flag to fall away into the background. So I'm going to leave this edge in here. I'm just going to kind of grade my way across, bearing in mind that some of these things can stay in the shadows because I'm going to build up my lights in the reds and whites. So I don't have to go too crazy. I just don't want to have abrupt edges in here. And again, this is experience. How do I know which marks go where, which things I can leave and which ones I can't? It's experience. Just polishing the surface of the painting. Neutralizing some things, leaving other things behind.
David Wolf said, "Interesting, I'm not a portrait painter, but I find this helpful."
Good, good. You know, David, the thing about this is that, like, I make the argument that there's no such thing as portrait painting, there's no such thing as landscape painting, there's no such thing as still life painting. There's only painting. It's not like you have, like, different components or moving parts for painting a portrait than you do for painting a landscape. They're the same. You know, you have paint and brushes, right? Your tools are the same, even palette knife, if that's what you work with. But you can do any subject with whatever the tools are. And then the only moving parts are your values, your edges, and your colors. They're the same outdoors as they are indoors. They're the same if it's a plant or a person, right? So if you understand how to paint, you can paint any subject. Yeah, there'll be a little bit of a learning curve. Going outside, your values have to be handled differently, your colors have to be handled a little differently, but the overarching ideas are the same. So, you know, whenever I see videos on how to paint a portrait, I kind of cringe at them, because you can't learn how to paint a portrait, you can only learn how to paint. Once you know how to paint, you'll be able to paint a portrait. You'll be able to paint a landscape. So, like, you know, for me, I'm always looking at these things and thinking that their application is absolute. You know, what I'm doing here would apply to a still life or to, you know, or to a landscape. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but we're taught to think that they're different. Like, there's a difference between a landscape and a painting done from life. Now, what I would say is that painting in a studio setting is different than painting outdoors. That takes getting used to, and you have to have an open mind about what you're doing. Like so, if you're a studio painter and you go outdoors and you paint plein air, when you come back inside, your painting's going to be really dark and really kind of murky looking. And it's a matter of learning that you have two components outdoors that you don't have indoors, right? And so I'm trying to remember where I read this. There's a story of a guy who is taught how to fire a bow without arrows. He spends years using the bow, where he perfects his technique. His movement is exactly the same every single time. There's no difference in his movement. 1,000 times in a row. Pulls back, let's go. Pulls back, let's go. And he's basically just perfected the technique. Never fired an arrow. The first arrow he fires, he comes wide of his target. Because his technique is identical, he now knows that he has to move over X number of inches to hit the target. And now he can hit the target over and over and over and over, because his technique doesn't change. All he had to do was figure out where the first arrow landed and then account for it. When you're learning how to paint, like, again, if you go outside, you're accustomed to painting in studio, the lights here are much less powerful than being out in sunlight. So your painting in here looks one way, and if you paint outside, you would paint very dark to account for the amount of light you're seeing hitting the surface of your painting. So you generally speaking, if you work in studio and then you go outdoors to paint, you got to paint like 3 values lighter than you think. Whatever you think it is, 3 values lighter. So when you take that painting from outdoors in sunlight into a studio space where you would hang it on a wall, under the diminished light, it looks properly lit, right? And so that's that, taking that first shot with the bow and then accounting for it and then shooting everything from there being perfect. Once you know what you're doing, you're just accounting for the new scenario. But you have the skill set that holds up. It doesn't matter what the thing you're painting is. Right, and so in here I'm allowing some areas where this brown is a little bit thinner, a little bit stronger, a little bit stronger. Just allowing it to kind of unify this space. I'm trying to separate, in my thinking, this part of the flag from the rest of it. I want this to feel connected here, and this to feel connected here. So, and then I'll bridge the gap in between them when I put in my lights. And so that's feeling pretty good to me. This feels unified with what's back in here. So now I know the flag, at least over here, is connected, tethered to the background. That's all I needed. So at this point, I can go in and I can probably just knock all of this down with a fan brush. And again, some of it's going to come up. I'm going to go very light to start. I'll probably then wipe away some things in here to give the impression of highlights, to give a little bit more form. Right now this is very flat. Don't want it to be flat. So I'll probably wipe out and then kind of knock that stuff down a little bit more. But again, just very gentle. I'm taking out brush strokes. Just neutralizing. And I gotta be careful. I don't want to lift too much paint. So I'm very, very gentle as I'm working. And I'm watching because this is a finishing pass. This is going to be sitting right on the surface of the painting when it's done. So I'm being very careful to manage it and refine it so that I don't have to go back and fix things, right? Stuff that's not finished yet can be a bit of a mess, like in here. But this is now going to be a finished, it's going to be basically be finished. There'll be some stuff that goes into it, but they're going to be smaller marks, not global shifts. Like this edge needs to be clean and smooth and make a nice transition from here into the flag, but also fade from the shadow side of the flag into the lit side of the flag without any jarring edges. So I have to be very thoughtful about what I'm doing in here. I'm going to deal in this stuff first, and then I'll work on the connection to the flag. And again, some of these kind of hash marks that have come in here through the smaller fan brush, if I like the way they look in some places, I'll leave them. I don't have to take them all out. They add a little bit more movement to the painting, which is never a bad thing in these, what are arguably dead spaces. It's funny, like this glaze, as dark as it is so shiny. My hands are distracted. They're reflected in the painting. I imagine you can probably see that.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bit hard to see. Everything back in here is reflected in the painting, and it's not a high gloss. It's actually a satin gloss, but it's so highly reflective. I mean, it's crazy, and that's nice. It's one of the things that. In a print, you won't see that, but in the original, if you stand in front of it, it's like, it makes the painting glow. But it can be distracting. Almost need to be dressed in total black with black gloves and black handled brushes to work. I'm finding this a little bit is too dark, so I'm trying to lift some of it. Try to break it up a little bit.
Do you think about what you're going to wear when you go to paint because of that?
You know what? Like a day like this will make me like curse myself for not thinking about it. But normally, no. Normally, I don't really think about it.
So like a bright neon green shirt.
No, like you would never see me doing that. Like you see, pretty much if you go back and you watch all the videos, I'm in neutral clothing every day. Even this is green. It's, it's like sap green. It's really quite neutral. If not for the fact that this was so reflective, like you wouldn't even really, it doesn't, like over here, it doesn't do anything. Over here, it just, even here it's not so bad. It's more my hands. But no, I tend to stay in neutral clothes. Those of you who know me, I only own gray. Something looks blue, but it's only blue relative to all the other gray that I own. I do, most of what I own is neutral. I'm just partial to it, so it's never a problem when I'm working because I'm always in something neutral.
Question, would you frame it before you present it? The painting is beautiful.
Thank you. No, framing is not my, I don't have any responsibility for the framing on this. They'll take care of that when it's delivered. If I have a client that's interested in my input, then I'll go with them when they go for framing, but I don't have, for the most part, it's not an area where I know very much. Know your limitations. I can look at a frame, put around this and say, yeah, that one looks good. Or like I would go with something warm or cool or a certain width. But framing, there are people who do framing and they're experts at it and you trust them. Also, like for me to frame it, again, just with a regular client, I don't know what they like. The frame has to fit the painting, but it also has to fit their home. You know, you can do something that's a beautiful fit for the painting, and then the painting looks so out of place in their home, and it is in large part because of the frame. So, you know, you have to take a lot of things into account, and people have particular tastes. So they will frame this when they get it, and like, I know it's gonna go into a gold frame. Like, I know that, but like I said, it's really their concern, what their budget's going to be, and all of that. Just trying to break up the edge on the brown just a little bit as it pulls over into the blue. I don't mind a little bit of degrade. The blue is degraded. It's turned into almost a brownish gray by the glaze. So I don't mind losing a little bit of the blue in there. When I put the star, I'm going to glaze blue over the flag and put the stars in. So I'll recapture most of it. And again, like your brain will fill in the blanks. Like viewing this, once the stars and the stripes are in and they're a little bit more dynamic, your brain will fill the blue in, even in the places. This will help to marry this big field of blue to this, and then the colorful part will stay over on this side. So anyway, I'm really liking the way this is feeling now. I'm going to go and I'm going to wipe out a few things that I think will enhance the painting in this back corner, give it a little bit more dimension. And so I just want to go in and just kind of figure out what it is that I can lift, what needs to be left in place.
Is that a bristle brush?
No, it's a synthetic. It really doesn't matter what it is. I'm just wiping out. I could use any brush for this. I just happen to have picked this one up. And all I'm doing is lifting to create some of these lighter and darker shades in here. And you can see it's not drastic. I'll probably use a rag and wipe some of these out a little further, but I find the brush is easier as a starting point to establish this. And even in here, the shadow, even though I have a shadow, the shadow is not quite as strong in here. Alright, so I'm breaking some of these shapes up just a little bit, making a little bit more sense of all the ins and outs of what's going on in here. And again, I'll go back over this with a fan brush. It's not going to stay this way. Some areas I'll lift more, some areas I'll lift less. I have a little rag on my ledge here that I'm wiping the brush in between. And again, this is just establishing some of the little ins and outs. back and take a look, see how it's pulling together. Yeah, so that's becoming nice and solid now. I do a little bit more wiping out now with a tight rag just to lift a little bit more paint. The brush is only going to do so much. It's meant for applying, not for removing. So I'll go back in, and now I'm just going to lift some of these things that I think need to be a little more prominent, leave the things that I think are feeling pretty good at the moment. Right? So I'm looking to establish some of the sharper edges, make a little bit more sense of them. And like I said, I am going to go back in and blend this out. And so this will all wind up being neutralized again, but we'll wind up with all these distinctly different kind of values, and you get the impression of all these different planes, which is really what I want. I want it to feel like it's in and out and in and out, without describing it too much. And again, I know I keep saying this. This doesn't mean that it's finished. I can still do more on top of it later on if I decide that it needs it. So this is just the next step in the process of getting to that finished painting. You can see varying degrees of paint left behind. Should be able to take my fan brush now and get in there and just knock all of it down. Neutralize the edges, but leave the varied value range intact. Right, so edges will go away hopefully, and we'll still be left with not as drastic a value shift, but a recognized shift from one thing to another. Again, just giving us a little bit more sense of the form, what's going on in here. I'm actually going around. I didn't like the way that this kind of broke down. So I'm going around and I'm trying to break down some of the edges where I wiped away first, so they're a little bit more, they're a little smoother going into me trying to drag the darker shades back into them. Again, bear in mind, these are supposed to be in the background. They are not meant to be front and center. They're meant to be off in the background, and I want to make sure that I'm maintaining that. But I also don't want them to be kind of coarse and unattractive. They've got to still feel like they're part of this whole. I also want edges that are linear to feel that way. Again, you know, the blur is going to kind of wobble edges, but I don't want something that's supposed to be straight to kind of meander too much. There's a certain amount of that we can tolerate and still feel like these things are straight. Where if we push it too far, they don't feel like they're solid and linear. Again, I will push these back. I just keep kind of working over this until I see them come out of focus. Again, out of focus like this. I want this kind of in this range. All right, so I've got nice variation in here now. Doesn't feel flat. Wipe out around the book once I've got, or the inside of the book, so that I don't want to have a gap between this background and the book. So I'm kind of pulling it into the book, and then I'll wipe out to establish the edge of the book again.
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned posting a high-res photo of the painting on the last segment. Did I miss it?
I did post. If you go through the feed, it's out there somewhere. It's not high res, but it's a cleaner version. You can get a sense of it. Facebook has severe limitations where that's concerned, but you'll be able to get a better look at the painting in the photograph than you're getting on video. When I am finished with the entire painting, I'm going to do a very large, like probably maybe 3,000 pixel tall image, so that you can actually get in and see it. I'll do close-ups and a whole bunch of other stuff, so you can actually see what. Again, it's not so easy to make it out here. You know, the video is just not that good. So I want you to be able to see exactly what this painting looks like at the end. And so what we'll probably do is we'll probably create a web page for it and then connect a link so that you can see not just the painting as a whole. You can download it and scale it up and really kind of get in and see it. But we'll do close-ups of some of these areas so that you get a better sense of what's going on here. Like you can see it, but you really can't see it. And the truth is, even when you see the photograph is maybe 20% of what the impression of the actual painting is. The painting is like, it's syrupy and rich and it breathes. And you won't be able to see that in the photograph on no matter what the quality of the photograph is that we post. You're really not going to get a sense of that. But I'd recommend, like, for all of you, if you're ever in New York, You can go to the Grand Lodge of New York and you can get a tour and you can see the original. You see the original in their that like amphitheater. Good, so I'm actually feeling really good about the way this is now. I'm just trying to neutralize a little bit more. It's still kind of jumping away a little more than I want, but this stuff is starting to really look, before it didn't, it just looked like a kind of scramble of stuff. It now feels solid, but out of focus. And that's what I was looking for. The flag is married to the background. Like you can't even tell where one ends and the other starts. That's what I wanted. And so this is all becoming unified just beautifully. So here I just go to a bigger brush and just really just kind of knock this stuff down. And you notice I'm staying away from here.
It's really a shame how the camera here in this live stream is not doing this background justice right now. The camera's trying to pick up and overcompensate for the subtlety that's in here.
Yeah.
So for those who are watching, just know that it's a little bit more muted.
Than it looks.
Yeah, but it's more muted and it looks really elegant.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we'll do our best to get an image, a really, really clean, color correct image for you when this is done, that you can get a nice tight look at it. So just kind of clean up the book. And you get even this. I'm not making perfect edges. Just trying to wipe out so that when I go in and I do the book, that I'm not having to deal with like dark marks in the book. The book is actually very old, and so there's like tattered edges. So I don't have to make these edges absolutely pristine. I just need to make them arguably, I just need to clean the overall face of the book. Get a small clean fan brush and just kind of go around and soften my edges. Right, again, the book is still not meant to be as sharp as him. I do want it to be soft. So just going back in and doing more of the same and knock these edges down. Push this in against the fingers. I'm just doing cleanup at this point. I don't want anything that's not supposed to have this drying in here. So, but I'm going in, I'm kind of cleaning up my edge against the hand so that I don't have an outline of one thing or another. I want it to all feel unified. So I'm just trying to unify what's going on down in here. Just a few strokes, just to make this connect to this color value-wise. And then, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. What are we? 2 o'clock. Okay. So, right, because my original intent was to do the flag, but I'm not going to do the flag. I think what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to push down into the bottom in here, and I think I'm going to get the background behind him over here done as well. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to break for lunch, and when I come back, it'll take like 20 minutes. When we come back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start establishing the front of the table, the color on these, so that when I go in later and I paint in my all my details, I'll be doing it basically the same way I did this. But I'll get that done. And then I'm going to get this to line up with this. Probably try to resolve some of this as well. And then knock out the background over here and back in here, so that tomorrow I could probably, as long as this is dry, I'll be able to resolve the flag and probably the book. And then I'll be able to jump in Wednesday and kind of polish off a lot of this. And then going into next week, it's really just this and just a little bit of glazing. I mean, we're almost there. We're almost there. So, and another thing we're going to do, it's going to take us a little bit of time. Once this is all done, we've actually got it filmed. It's HD. We're going to cut out all of me talking, and we're going to time lapse it. So you'll be able to watch the whole painting being done in like 3 or 4 minutes. We'll see how long, what a good time frame is, but you figure the painting's taken me about 60 hours. I think we're somewhere around 60, 65 hours when it's done, I think, somewhere around there. You figure if I talked about 2/3 of the time, we talk about half the time. So we're talking about a 30-hour painting. We'll condense it down to maybe 5 minutes. And so you'll be able to see it really kind of evolve quickly, and then you'll have the high-res image to kind of make the comparison. But you can see, these things are starting to feel solid and finished. And that's where we want to be. I'll be able to glaze a little bit of gold and some greens and some little bits of color back in here so that it's not just one color. And I'll do that next week. But we're moving along. So why don't we break? Why don't we take, it's 10 minutes to 2. Why don't we do, yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
In the picture, the post by the top of the flag looks really gold. Mm-hmm.
Up here, yeah.
Will that be made more gold or kept in the background color?
It is going to be, it's actually going to be less gold. So this column is the right color right now, but this one isn't. The 2 columns, they're different colors actually. One is gold, you can see it's actually a spot on match. This one is a little bit brassier. And so I have to make the decision as to whether or not to leave this and this column the same. When I put the flutes in, they'll make more sense. Or do I make this more brassy to better fit the photograph? And I've got to make a decision about that. Early on, I decided to start and make it all one thing. And I did that because I used the same color in a whole bunch of different places. So like there's this theme where I'm repurposing the colors over and over and over again. Rather than making something completely new, I'm repurposing. So this basically was used in a bunch of places. It's not only is it here, it was in the skin, it's down in here, it was behind all this. This color in the columns is the same color as the shadow inside of the jewelry and in this. Same in the flag, you can see it. So I do need to make a decision as to what I'm doing with that column. I haven't gotten there yet. I have to make the decision before I fill it today. So I'll figure that out. I'll figure that out. A little bit of dust landed on there, and I can't touch it. I've just got to leave it there. I'll get it off after we get off filming. But I've got to make a decision about this before I fill this area. And I don't know if it would be a distraction to have it different, or if it's better to just leave it the way it is. And so again, taking a little bit of artistic license. And I don't know, in that space, those columns, it makes sense that they'd be the same color, but they don't look it. And so I have to make a decision about that. And I'll do that over the break. Before I start painting it, I'll make that decision. But all I would have to do to make the change is the same as I did here, where I would cover everything and then add something into this. I'd add green probably. And the green would take some of the orange out, making it feel a little brassy. And it would be green probably with a little bit of pink. To me, reads is what would probably be the best way to go. Green by itself is going to look like olive, and that's not what I want. It needs a little bit of pink in it, but yeah, so.
She was actually asking about this part of
about this in here.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another one. So this is actually, so again, we have this conversation about what color are things, right? And I would say that objects don't have a color of their own, right? Objects have a molecular structure. All of the color is in the light bulb or in the sun. The light from whatever source hits the object. The molecular structure absorbs portions of the light spectrum and bounces other portions. The portions that are bounced make you believe that you're seeing a color, right? So though this is arguably gold in that scene, that photograph, the way that I've painted this is no longer lit. The absence of light would lend to an absence of color. Now, I was saying a few minutes ago, I will glaze some color in here. There will be some gold added in here. Very, very subtle. But this will look gold relative to the neutral, brownish, plum kind of color that's back in here. There's some green in here as well. And there's some kind of like, there are colors back in here. So when you look in here, there's green in here. This is a bit of gold, but not gold like this. This is kind of, I mean, they're fairly neutral, but they're like dark, neutral, peachy colors. And so, like, how much of that do you put in? How much do you leave out? Again, the less light you have in the space, the less color you have to explain, because an absence of light is an absence of color. And so back in here, I will put some gold in here, but it's going to be subtle. I don't want this looking like this. I want it to be recognized that this is this, just not in the light. And so I'm describing it as something that has a little bit of gold, but that you would recognize as gold if only you could get some light on it. And so, but for now, for me to put the gold in now, it's going to get muddied up with everything else. Easy for me to just brush it on Monday. It'll take me like 3 seconds. And that little hit sitting on the lights, the places where I erased, will feel gold. They won't be anywhere near as rich as this, but they will feel equally gold, just that one is lit and one isn't. And if, again, your brain will make the calculation. It'll make the jump that even though this and this are completely different colors and values, in this space, what little gold is in here will read as gold, and your brain will know that if there were only more light, it would look like this. Okay? So let's break. It is now 5 minutes to. Let's come back at 2:15. I'm going to polish off this bottom down in here and this. And when I get this in, he's going to start to become really prominent. So this is really going to kind of pull him forward. I'm going to get in the gray of his hair also, because while the background is wet, I may as well just establish that edge. So see you back here at 2:15 Eastern Standard Time.
Do you want to show them the removing the dust speck?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Sounds good.
I will take it out. See you in a little while. I'm just going to go in here and pull out a little bit of. Create a little bit more reflection for whatever my gold is. Again, this is just a soft brush, no paint on it. I'm using it just to kind of lift what's already there. And my paint is starting to stiffen up. Because this brush is very soft, it's actually not creating much in the way of harsh edges. that I would have to clean up afterwards. Very gently, just make sure that it falls back. I want it to be a little bit lighter than some of this other stuff around it, just so that it carries the gold that I put on top of it a little better. It does need to look like it's off in the background. So let me get down in here. Again, down in here is going to be pretty simple. I do want to get some color in here as well. So, So just to kind of get this out of the way, I'm going to glaze over the red tassel with some red. And in fact, I'm even going to grab the edge of the table. The edge of the table is going to be a brown. It's going to be quite warm. So it's like a stained oak. But I'm just going to, again, I keep doing this, repurposing colors, using things over and over again. I don't want this to be too red, so I'm using the brown from the background, and I've dropped a little bit of red in it, but I'm just trying to, I want to get the red on this tassel in place so that when I paint in the lights, I can leave these as the shadows. Right, that's the idea. The idea is to be able to leave this stuff in place as the shadows and then only paint the lights on the tassel. Again, all of this is going to be painted. The cross will all be painted almost directly. So that's good. That'll be a good shadow value. Just cover all that. I've got some, I'm just looking to see if there's anything else in here that I can kind of hit with this. I think that's good, that'll work. Now I'm just going to get back into that original brown that I used up in here, unify this, and then I'll add some blue in here, and then that'll basically take care of this bottom corner. I don't have to do a lot in here, I don't have to do a lot in here because because it's just it's a bit of a black hole. I need to make sure that it that it feels like there's some movement, much like I did in here, right? There's table legs and there's a step that kind of rolls across here. I just want to make sure they're in place. But beyond that, there's not much that I'm looking to do in this corner. I'm trying to leave it very simple. I don't need details here because there's details everywhere else. So there's something to be said for having quiet places in a painting, right? A painting that has a lot of loud screaming needs some quiet places as well. And so, like, all of this makes it that nothing is necessary back here. It can't just be blank, but you don't need anything to stand out. Keeping everything subtle down here is the best thing you can do to kind of move the painting forward. Again, these are all holes in between these metals, so we've got to kind of get those darkened as well. Otherwise, they won't line up well when I paint the metals and around them. And I don't want to have to paint both the metals and the holes. So it's easy enough to just put the holes in now while I'm kind of here covering. And again, all of this just unifies this. It's just going to unify it for later on when I go in and I start doing this. When I start painting in the particulars for each of these. Again, I'm at this point, I'm literally just painting over everything. I decided it's easier as I'm doing it. It's easier to just cover everything, and then, like I said, I will paint in the lights and the lights alone, much like I did on the collar, and that should basically take care of it. So easier to just kind of go over all of this. This kind of falls more in line with this color, just a darker version of it. And since there's less light over here, that makes sense. It allows me to just unify all of this stuff under one tone, background and metals.
Got high praise from Bill Meeker. Incredible detail. What?
I said, hey, Bill.
Incredible detail work on the necklace metals, etc. But I see now how this portrait can be appreciated both from across the room 30 feet away, and yet when the viewer steps up to admire and examine the painting close up at a few feet, will be surprised and amazed at the detail within.
Yeah, and the painting, a well-made painting should be appreciated from both distances. It really, and that doesn't mean that it has to be tight and detailed. A lot of the time, stepping up to a painting and seeing that it looked razor sharp from 20 feet away, and when you get up to it, it's nothing but a bunch of dashes and marks and strokes and splashes, and the painting just comes together. And there's some serious skill involved in pulling that off. That doesn't happen accidentally. Knowing, I think I've said it here, but there's a great saying, like, a good artist knows what to put in. A great artist knows what to leave out. It's not so easy when you're standing at arm's distance from a painting to leave things unfinished, right? It takes a lot of self-control and it takes a lot of confidence to know that what you're about to leave out isn't going to hurt the painting, that it's actually going to make the painting better. But the thing is, you're leaving it out. And there's a level of discomfort that comes with that. I can tell you from experience, there is a level of discomfort that comes from abandoning your reference material and basically making the decision that you know better than the reference what will make the painting a better painting. Because it's literally what you're doing. It's a point where you depart from the reference material because you believe you know better. And I could make the argument that, like, when you're doing that, you have to have confidence, because there's a feeling of arrogance that goes with that. Like, I know better than what the reality was. That's what you're saying, and you don't do that unless you know what you're doing. But even when you know what you're doing, it's still uncomfortable. And I don't think it matters how many times you do it and it's successful. You're stepping out on a limb saying that you know better. And people don't like to do that. It's so much safer to sit quietly in the crowd of people just copying photographs. And so, when you see that, like you walk up to like a sergeant, from across the room it looks so tight. And then you walk up and it's like, it's like hands are like 6 strokes. There's an artist on the internet, I'm drawing a blank on his name, really, really skilled painter, but he goes and he actually tries to calculate how many brushstrokes are in a sergeant's face or a sergeant's hand. And he actually marks them. This is like here, right? And it's like, wow, the idea that you could even count the number of marks that make up a hand or a face, how bold the marks are that nothing is hidden. And that from 10 feet away, it is absolutely a hand. And from 5 feet away, it's nothing but a bunch of really, really bold marks. And I just, like I said, learning to paint is learning to manage that. So many people think that like realism is about copying a photograph, or even for that matter, copying a subject from direct observation and being locked into what they look like and not being allowed to make your own decisions about it. But it's actually that couldn't be farther from the reality. Being a good realistic painter is about understanding the world and being able to take what matters in it, bringing it to life, leaving behind the things that don't move the argument forward. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And again, like I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm here, I'm repurposing this color in here, unifying the bottom of the book with all of this. There'll still be a lot to do on the book, but at least I'm connecting the book to this. The more I can manage here, the less I have to do later to kind of bring it together and make it feel like it's all part of the same thing. Okay, so I've got everything covered. Now I'm going to go and drop a little bit of blue in here, like I did up above. And so, to me, this side of the leg definitely needs, there's a lot of blue on that. So this actually really needs it. I'm going to drop this, I'm going to bring this all the way back in here. I'm going to leave a little bit of room between this and what I washed over this stuff. That way I can get some of these reds or browns kind of peeking out. All right, I want this leg to be stark against this background. That way this feels up front and this feels further away. The book feels in front, so it's like here to here to here. I get a little bit of this in here, not much. I'll leave the rest of the leg alone, and then on this side of the leg, wow, it's so hard to see. Bottom of the leg, I want to kind of separate it. Right, so I don't want to have a lot of the blue in here. I want to leave it mostly red, but I do want to get some play. I want it to feel like it's an extension of what's going on up here. Even though this is actually an extension of what's going on down here, there's some stairs, I do need to connect it. It can't feel like this ends here and then this is something completely different. So I do need to manage that a little bit. Just try to get some of the blue in here. So it's a matter of figuring out what goes where. Where can I put these blues? Where is it best to just leave them out? To kind of break these shapes up. I think I could probably do this and then just create a gradient going up. So I have my blue against my red. I'm now going to have red against blue, kind of inverted down here. And I think, like once I've got this blocked in, I'll step back away from it and take a look at it and see if see how this looks to me. Again, obviously this is going to be knocked down. It's not going to be left sharp. A little bit of blue in there. I'm just going to step back and get a look at it. Again, just try to figure out what would look good in here to break the shape up. Trying to make sense of what's going on under here. There's a lot going on back in here. Some of it is an extension of a stair, some of it is multiple tables. There's a stone in here. So just trying to piece it all together so that I'm not making an odd shape that doesn't have some relevance in this. Again, I also kind of creating this vignette. I'm darkening the corner, darkening the bottom of the leg, trying to not have these lighter things running off the canvas. I'm trying to kind of block them off at the edges so that the lights stay in here and the darks kind of encompass them. And that's going to help to prevent these things from just feeling like this stuff is spilling off the page. Again, up in here I've left it because the table's so solid up in here. But down in here, it's all in shadow. It's kind of a ghost of an image. And so I want to keep this subtle. Again, these metals, when they go in, are going to overtake this in a big way. That being the case, I don't want to overstate what's in here. But this feels structural, but at the same time is not overly descriptive. which I think is the best way to go. So I'm just going to start knocking some of the stuff down. Basically the same as I did before, just kind of. And obviously, I'm not building structure like I did up above. This is just kind of like hints, where before I was trying to follow patterns in and out. These are literally just they're like linear lights and shadows. And so I just want to knock the edges down, take away their prominence while still leaving the overall feeling of them in place. Kind of let them fall away and become more smoke than anything else. Not everything needs to be equally described. So I'm okay letting some of this stuff literally just fall away. And again, even while I'm doing this, I'm still thinking about my edges. It's funny, like that never goes away. I'm still thinking sharp edges and graded edges. Again, this pass, I'm not overly worried about it, but I will go in and make sure, like, I'm leaving a harder edge here and a softer edge here. I'm leaving a harder edge here and a graded edge here. I am working that stuff into the painting. At no point do I ever let that actually go, right? Because that's one of the fundamental moving parts. At no point am I just painting. I am thinking all the time, values, colors, edges, values, colors, edges. The values and colors are mostly being worked on the palette, and then the placement and the edges are handled on the painting. But they never fall away. They never become irrelevant. But it's so easy when you're working on a piece like this to forget what the painting is made of. So easy to forget that no matter how complex the painting gets, it is still just values, colors, and edges, and that you have to think of the painting that way. You can't ever let that go away. Once you lose sight of that, you're now just painting what you see. And I say this all the time, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so, even in a piece like this, or even I would say especially in something of this scale, you must hold on to those bedrock principles that neutralize the complexity of this and turn it into just any other painting, something half the size with a tenth of the moving part, a tenth of the different things, right? If you have a process where you can break the painting up into values, colors, and edges and see it for nothing than more than just that, even something as complex as this seems, it brings it down to earth. And that's the goal. The goal is to bring something like this down to a manageable place where you can kind of dismantle it, take it apart, and conquer it. But you can't do that if you're simply painting what you see. Because what you see is just arguably too complex. So turn it into those three moving parts and maintain those as your focus. All of a sudden, something like this becomes manageable. All right, so one of the things I've done is I've dragged these browns and covered the flag, because in the overall painting, I don't want this being as strong as this. In the overall painting, this is going to become a distraction. This is where I want your view. I don't want you coming down and looking below the book. So I want to try to neutralize all of this. You know it's the flag, but it's not going to be prominent like this. It'll have a little bit, a couple of hits of light in here maybe, or I might just wipe away some of what I just put down. But I just neutralized this. I pulled this all the way across, much like I neutralized this edge. I did the same down in here. And what that's going to do is it's going to help to keep this from becoming a distraction. We have this really dark leg. It's very dark and it's cool, and we've got these warms in here. I need to keep these things from starting to become detailed, so they become even more contrasted. So I'm leaving this quite subtle. This has to be dark. It has a weight, a heft to it. So this has been turned into like a colorful smoke at this point, and the overarching color is the same as this whole big shape, which is what's pulling the flag back into the background. So I'm using it back in here for that purpose. And again, even this leg, as strong as the leg is, as I'm going over this, the edge underneath it is very soft. It's not sharp. And I'm going over this and I'm breaking up the edge of it. I don't want it to be sharp. I want it to be soft. The book will be sharper than this. I'm maintaining a hierarchy from my sharpest edges to my softest edges. Again, going back to those components, I've not let go of that. From the very beginning, I have not let go of that. This edge is sharper than this edge and these edges, so that this feels like it is in front of these. Again, this metal is going to sit in front of this leg, so I'm dissolving the edge of the leg where it goes behind the metal so the metal jumps away. Again, softening the edge so it's sharper here and grades and dissolves. That way when I put this in, this pulls away from the leg. Again, playing my edges. Obviously, I wasn't worried about it when I first put the paint down, but now as I'm kind of refining, I'm dealing with that. So the leg is lighter here, it gets darker as it goes up, so you have dark against these lights. Contrast separates. The edge of the leg goes from sharp, relatively speaking, to soft, where these lights are going to be sharp. That's another thing that's going to separate them. So these metals are going to feel like they are dangling in space, because the stuff behind it, both value-wise and edge-wise, are diminished relative to the impact of what these things will be. And again, it doesn't have to be drastic, just a little bit will make the point. I'm just going around making sure everything is kind of knocked down. Again, just lifting a little bit of paint, getting a little bit more prominence in the stripes so that we know what we're looking at, that the flag continues down here. If there's too much of a jump between this and this will feel disconnected. So I want to make sure that this still feels like the flag down in here. And I may have to lift a little bit more. Again, step back and take a look at it. Yeah, so I feel like I have to lift a little bit more of that. And so I'm making a decision. I'm looking from back here, I'm making a decision. I can lift some of this, and I would just take out the white to make it feel more like this. Or I could put in the new white down in here in a diminished version. So it'll be lighter here and darker here, but it'll still read here like it's the same thing. Or I could take this color and put it in here and grade it up and let it dissolve like up in here. And then the flag grades from top to bottom. So I have a bunch of choices, and I have to just decide now which one is better. So each one of them will give me the result, but if I put these lights down in here, if I wipe this out, if I put the lights down in here while leaving this alone, that kind of brings this up, and now it starts competing with the gloves. It really kind of becomes a contrasted area that will require a lot of control. If I take this and I put it up in here, the front of the book and actually the jacket will start to pull away from this as this becomes more neutral. And that might actually be the nicer, more elegant way to go. I need to take a couple of minutes in my head and decide, but I kind of like that. I like the idea, because this actually looks really nice. When I step back, this looks nice. It looks, there's a real classical kind of feel. Like you go into a museum and you see like old paintings, it feels like that. It's brand new, but it feels aged. This doesn't feel aged. This does, but this doesn't. And so I can't have aged and new. So if I age the bottom of this, then it becomes a gradient from new into aged, and then aged is continued down in here. I hope that makes sense. But I'm thinking about the overall impression, what the benefit of aging this to look like this, or making this look more like this, so this contemporary. But again, I don't mind taking a minute to decide how best to handle it. The flag all on the top at the left already has these colorations in them, right, in it, right? So I've already used this up in here. So it's not a big deal for me to just kind of curve it down and bring it in here. Really not a big deal. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I really kind of like the way that feels as I'm thinking about it. Is there a question?
Not a question, just a comment from
Yes.
Nicholas. A gradient of age.
Yeah. Well, everything imparts its own personality. And so, yeah, I mean, this looks aged. It looks like stained old varnish. And I gotta tell you, I'm all too often I see videos of like restoration. I'm sure all of you have seen these videos where they guys, what do they call them? Varnishing videos, where they take a painting that's all sunken and they varnish it and it comes to life. Well, there are other videos where you'll see a restoration guy where they use a Q-tip and they clean an old kind of crusty looking painting, and they use a Q-tip and they wipe away all the old, like smoke covered filthy varnish, and the painting underneath is like it's warm, like this, the painting with the varnish is warm and it looks aged. It looks like it's been around forever. And then when they take the varnish off, the painting looks light and cool and delicate. And to me, so much of the beauty is lost when they take that old filthy varnish off. And so for me, I like the idea of building that classical look into the painting. Not as again, like you think about a classical painting, they are old and they feel old. And if you make a painting like this and it feels too contemporary, like for me, not that it always does, but often enough it falls flat. So I kind of like the idea of building that antique feel into the painting. And so I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that. Can't stop myself. I'm grabbing a little bit of extra red for this. I gotta be careful on this edge, because this stuff I don't know, it could be setting up already. I don't want to find myself in a place where I've got wet paint bumping up against dry or sticky paint. So just up in here, I'm just gonna kind of run it thin with some extra oil. Just kind of age the flag a little bit. And again, even up in here, I'm dropping it into my shadows up here to unify all of this. I will work on top of this afterwards, and I'll drop in my lights and everything, but this is gonna antique even the flag is gonna feel a little bit antiqued by this. Again, just little bits. I don't need everything in here, but I do want to make sure the blue doesn't feel like it has none of this. I want to make sure all of the shadows in here have it. Again, just scribble and knock it down. That didn't really require much. Again, you know, I actually, during the break, I was talking to Daniel and I said how, you know, when I'm doing this, it's like making an omelet on the fly. Just kind of, really just like throwing stuff in and kind of adjusting it for the flavor that I want in the moment that I want it. Like, I didn't know I was going to do this. It wasn't part of the plan. It became part of the plan about 4 minutes ago. And just the painting kind of led me in this direction. Take this over the edge of the jacket, just make sure that, because I don't want the jacket, I don't want there to be any gap. These darker shades actually make the flag look further away. They make the flag feel like it's kind of like the lights are forward and the darker shades fall away, which will make him a little bit more prominent. So again, just kind of pushing this over the jacket, and then I'll wipe it out of the jacket. I don't want its warmth sitting over the jacket. The jacket's nice and cool. Or relatively speaking, it is cool. And of course, so now we've got a nice aged American flag. I may even decide to leave it like this. I'll see how it feels once it's all dry and I've kind of moved the rest of the background forward. Obviously, I'm not going to be working on the flag today to bring any of that other stuff up. But when I get the rest of this in, it'll help to tell me what to do here. So I just want to take a step back and get a look at this.
I have a question about
Yes.
Your thought process in making a change like this. So if you obviously you know your client, you know the person that you're painting, and so are you taking that into account when you're making a arguably a drastic decision like that, or
No,
like a
no. So again, I'm not being I'm not being faithful to the reference in this aspect, but I am creating a feeling. I know what the intent is because I've seen the other 50 paintings in the room. I know what the intent, what this painting is meant to do, what it represents. So here we're dealing with a fraternity that is 300 years old, right? No, 600 years old. It's been around a while. It's the oldest fraternity in the world. I think a 100-year-old Bible, an aged flag, and like making this feel like an antique is not a bad thing. For an organization that is so steeped in traditions, making it feel like have that warmth. You know what this feels like to me? It feels like rich stew on a cold day. That's what that feels like to me. And that sounds ridiculous, but that's what it is. It's like, I don't want to come in from a freezing cold day and be given a sandwich. It's not, I want stew. I want something with a little bit with some heat and some body to it. And it's like...
With some musket powder in it?
Well, I don't know about that, but and to me, this is heartier. It feels right. And again, it may not be right, but it feels right. And it's like, when you get to a point when you can paint what you feel. It's a whole different thing from painting what you see, right? So to give you an idea, like how I think about this stuff, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. So I find that a successful piece of art, whether it's mine or somebody else's, and we're talking realism. When you stand in front of the painting, you feel what the artist was feeling. You're not seeing what they were seeing. You are feeling what they were feeling, right? Because I'm painting based on what feels right. This relationship, I've completely changed it now from where it was. And I've given it a very different, not just look, but it feels different. It changes the painting. And so when you stand in front of the painting, the overall visual experience of standing in front of the painting will give you a sense of, you will feel about the painting the way I felt about it while I was making it. And I don't mean that I liked it so you'll like it. I mean, like, when I talk about that, like that warm stew on a cold day, you stand in front of the painting, you can actually feel it. At least I think you can. And if I've been successful, you would be able to. And again, it's not a matter of whether you like the painting or not, but the feeling would be there. I mean, I've stood in front of paintings that I don't think are that good. Like, I don't like the subject matter, I don't like the composition, but I feel the painting. Like, I can feel the guy who painted it really knew what he or she was doing. Because I was able to, even though I might not think the way they do, and I wouldn't present a painting the way that they did, there was something so much more than the visual connected to it. And it's a connection between the viewer and the artist kind of through the painting. And so for me, this decision is just that. It's me imparting how I feel, which will hopefully translate over to somebody viewing it, feeling something similar. Just getting a little bit of blue. This is feeling awfully warm down in here, so compared to what's up here. So I just want to get a little bit of this blue in here, kind of covering everything. Just a little bit of blue, not a lot. And I'll knock it down. And again, just to keep everything in line, I don't want to have a departure from here to here. I want it to feel like it's the same flag. Again, even the book, slowly but surely, marrying these colors to the things around it, darkening, just strengthening the book and bringing it in line, making sure that it doesn't get left behind. And even this, I'm dragging this into the book. Not trying to maintain this edge. There's an edge there. I can now marry these, and then later on I'll use this edge to separate it. The book back here will stay connected to the background. The front of the book will pull forward and stay connected to the gloves. That's going to give me more distance. If I cut the book out and make everything feel like it's forward, then the book will feel literally cut away from the painting. This marries it to the rest of the painting. There we go. Yeah. Looks almost like a war-torn.
Frank said, I always tell my students, paint what you see, not what you think you see. Then paint what you feel, not what you see.
It takes a long time to get to that painting what you feel. You need a solid vocabulary, but that's basically the path. That's basically the path. You get to a point, and again, this is not for a student. Let me rephrase that. You're always a student, but this is not for somebody who really doesn't have command over things. But the idea is that you need the rules to learn. Once you know what you're doing, the rules no longer apply. But you have to be careful about making that decision, like when you start taking those steps. It's not like you wake up one day and you're like, well, the rules no longer apply to me, I'm just going to paint. Slowly but surely, one rule, you find, oh, I could bend this and get a better result. I could bend it more and get a better result. Oh, I could throw this thing out almost entirely. I don't need it as a guide anymore. I know what to do with that stuff, and everything I do, I'm constantly one-upping my reference material. So why am I adhering to a strict structure? But you need the strict structure in order to get to the point where you don't need the strict structure. And I would recommend, like when you're teaching students, so you would probably, if you've gone through and you've looked at a lot of the Evolve stuff, you would know I have like a knee-jerk reaction to the paint what you see, draw what you see. And my argument is that somebody who is learning doesn't know how to draw a paint yet, doesn't know how to see. And without a framework where they learn how to see, those filters, we do it with proportional drawing, and then we do it in proportional drawing in block 2, and then we further open up those neural pathways in block 3 when we do color mixing. But every aspect of what we're doing is teaching students not just how to see, but how to filter what they see so they can make sense of it. And then we're giving them a platform, a process that is very strict, at least at first, to take what they filtered and apply it in a meaningful way. Right? And to me, until you actually really kind of know what you're doing, makes sense, you have a structure, a way of thinking, a way of filtering data, you can't paint or draw what you see because you can't see and you don't have enough skill to paint. In Evolve, block 4 is where we kind of take all of those guards away and go, okay, now paint what you see. But we're 50 plus paintings into the education with very strict filters. When you hit that place where we go, okay, training wheels are off, have at it. Now you know how to see. You're still developing, but you now know how to process and filter what you're seeing by value, color, and edge. And you know how to apply the paint in a structured manner based on those filters. And so for me, though, Frank, you have the right idea. You want to eventually paint what you see, not what your brain kind of anticipates is in front of you, but what you actually see. That requires the development of neural pathways that don't exist in the average person. Once you know how to paint what you see, then you want to paint what you feel. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the path from novice to mastery. Getting to the point where you are painting what you feel, and not just painting it, translating it, so that somebody else looking at your painting feels what you were feeling. And again, I don't know I don't know how often I'm successful when I do that. It's what I strive for, because I'm putting everything I've got into this. Like it wasn't as much of a technical choice. Like I had a couple of options, but the one that felt right is the one that I went with. And so even though I'm not imparting like how it feels to me, how I feel is what told me what to do here. It's how I made my decision. And so that decision leaves the painting with a visual impression, which hopefully is picked up by the viewer. You know, and I say hopefully because you really don't know. Like, how many people do unless you stand around your finished paintings with a mask on so no one knows who you are and you listen to what they're saying, like you don't really know what people are taking in. And also, can people express what they're feeling about what they're looking at? You know, you have to trust that you're doing the best that you can, that you're being careful in the decisions that you make, that they all move the painting in the direction that you intend, that nothing is done carelessly. And if you do all of that, then you put the painting out into the world and hope that it's received as intended. It's a lot of ifs and a lot of hopes. For me, I find it best to make the painting the best I can and then get away from it and not worry about what other people think and just go on and start the next one. You know, because again, so much of this is people's opinions. As long as you have an objective standard by which you measure the quality of your work, you know if you're cutting corners or not. As long as you're not doing that, it's probably better to not know, particularly non-pros. You get a critique from another pro, that's different. Because most pros are not going to just throw their opinion at you, like artist to artist. Like, I'll never have another pro say to me, I really like this. They will say, I like how you play this color specifically against that color specifically. Why did you choose to do that, right? So the conversation is much more particular. An artist's opinion, doesn't really matter if it's not attached to something concrete. Like, you can like something, but that's just your aesthetic. I like what I just did. Doesn't make it right. Technically, it doesn't work. I mean, it works fine, there's no problem with it. So from that standpoint, I've cleared that hurdle. Technically, this would be graded as an A. You could see my thought process. It was sound. But at this point, another person's opinion about it, it really doesn't matter because you get 100 people, 100 people with different opinions. So, and as an artist, you don't want to find yourself chasing after everybody's opinion to decide whether you're doing a good job, right? You want to do what fits you and put it out into the world and then move on to your next piece. At least for me. It's been a very long time since I've worried about what other people think about what I do, particularly with my art. And that's liberating. So here, I'm actually dragging some of this background color into here as well. Just so that there's not as much of a departure in here. This is really kind of sitting. It's going to help me to attach him to the background here because this is going to separate. So I was talking earlier, this is all going to attach. This will separate. This is attached, but this will separate. And then this is separated from the background here and here, and it's connected to him here, right? So I'm still thinking in terms of how to connect and separate aspects of this painting. Pulling a little bit of this color and bringing it into the jacket a little bit. Again, it's not changing the color of the jacket, but it just a tiny, tiny little hint. Helps me to make it into something a little bit more solid and make it feel like it's all connected. All right, again, just going over everything, making sure everything is nice and smooth and clean. No blobs of paint. This bottom edge on the table, I'm going to dissolve a little bit. In the photograph, it's not so distinct. And so I'm gonna dissolve the edge a little. I want this edge prominent. The light's really hitting that edge, but this edge, I can knock it down a little bit. Just kind of push this paint up into here. And again, this is almost the right color for the finished painting at this point. It's really more a matter of highlights on this edge than anything else to complete it. So here I've now, to a degree, I have neutralized that bottom edge, connected the bottom of the table to the background. I'm gonna pull this down and just reestablish the top edge a little bit. Again, there'll be a highlight in here which will separate the top of the table from the side of the table, but this is nice and soft now. And again, same in here, do the same thing.
Going back to the conversation about painting what you see
Yes.
from Frank. Frank said, comes from my studio art class. When we draw eyes, they draw it like a football shape because that's what they think it looks like.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite one is heads, where the eyes wind up like where the hairline belongs, because people have an idea, and they've never actively viewed. They're passively viewing, and their brain is tricking them into thinking that they've seen something they haven't. But yeah. Good. So again, just trying to soften that a little bit. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to wipe some things out. And I think this is actually done down in here. I think I can actually kind of walk away from this at this point. Funny, like little hairs and things floating in here. I do want to take another look at it. I'll step back before I go in and clean it up. I want to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with this. Even the stairs are looking, they're so delicate, but they're there. So we got two stairs in here. This kind of comes across here. So make this a little bit more delicate so it's kind of more in line with the softness of that. Again, just knocking everything down. None of this is supposed to read as details. It's supposed to be smoky. This is going to jump away. So we're seeing this now because there's nothing over here to distract. But when we drop these metals in, this is barely going to be, you're barely even going to notice it, which is the idea. I gotta get in here. Just gotta clean a few things up. And then we'll be able to kind of jump up here. I'm actually before I go any further, I'm actually gonna grab a little bit of the same color and I'm gonna drop it in here as well. Going to get this shadow more in line with what's back in here. Again, I'm darkening it a little bit, kind of let it come over the clothing. Just let it kind of drop in. It becomes, again, I'm repurposing the color and I'm using it to further establish all of these colors that I'm using back in here, even in the figure. Again, doesn't have to be much, just enough. And what I'm doing is I'm adding in color. I'm adding in some of this, like a little bit of extra red into here, which I used back in here. This is going to be more gold. I can allow this to be a little bit darker, a little bit more of this color, so that the apron feels more prominent here and kind of rolls around back into the space. back in here. And you'd be surprised, like a lot of these things, they're like errant brush strokes. I can actually leave them if I want to. Some little strokes going into the gloves. I can leave them alone if I want to. I can clean them if I want. I'm not locked into having to do one or the other. Kind of pick and choose. Some places I like I've got a little bit of a ridge in here. I've got some loose kind of choppy looking strokes out here against the edge of the glove that I could smooth or I could leave. Got a little bit of movement in there. I kind of like them. So I'm going to leave them alone. And then on the kind of the edge of the book here, I don't need to clean much here because there is a highlight on the edge of the book there, I think. There's a bit of a ridge on the book that I'm going to have to paint in. So that's going to wind up being handled. This edge, I'm going to clean up because it's crisp in the end, in the final painting. We're actually doing pretty good on time. So I'm going to get the area around his head done and his hair as well. And that'll be enough for today. The painting, you can see it's starting to, the space is now starting to fit with the figure. But it's coming together beautifully. Feeling very happy.
We've got people back. We have people back.
Okay, so we're much lighter up in here than back in here. So I'm going to do a much thinner coat in here, and then I'm going to play around with coloration. I'm going to lower this a little bit. So again, I'm starting in that same coloration, that same kind of murky, muddy, purplish brown. So here doesn't do anything, but here you can see it. So, I mean, I'm basically going to paint over everything. And you'll see, like, as I do this, how his head becomes nice and prominent. He'll start to pull away from the background. Obviously, this is not going to stay this way. I've got to manipulate this color, the density of it here. But I do want to solidify this. Just getting this covered so that it feels a little bit more solid. It feels more in line with the darks on this side, some of the darks in here. And again, as the value around his head gets darker, he becomes more prominent. It's not the end goal to be this shade, but you can see how he starts to pull away from the background as I put this in. Even against his tie, this just a slightly darker value changes the relationship between him and the environment. So, again, in a fairly smooth and even pass, you can see how he really starts to step forward. I want to keep it generally around this area. I don't want this competing with him, and I want this to feel like it's part of this. But there's definitely more light over here, so I have to kind of manage both of those things. These areas can probably be left exactly as they are. It's what I do in here. So, for starters, I am going to change this column just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of green to it, which is going to make it, well, hopefully, we'll see in a second, make it a little bit brassier. I don't know. Again, we're just going to see how it looks. I don't mind this one being a little bit richer and kind of a more colorful gold. But this one I'm going to diminish it a little bit. I mean, again, this is what I've mixed here, something on the order of like a sap green. For those of you who are curious what I'm putting down here. And I'm taking this out because, like, though I don't mind this, this is a distraction between these two things because of the way it kind of rolls against his face. And so, to me, it just strikes me as needing something a little bit more, or needing a little bit less of a variation in here. So I'm kind of toning down the color, taking some of the sting out of it. And again, it's gonna get a little bit lighter, but it has less of that orangish gold in it now, and that's really what I was looking for. I'll see how it feels. I may wind up having to wipe some of that out and maybe go in with a lot less paint down, a lot less of a glaze and more green. But I do want to kind of play with it and see what happens as I start pulling some of the paint away. Like you can see, these don't feel the same anymore. This is fairly dark. We'll see how it looks as I kind of keep moving the paint around and lift a little bit as I go. I'm going to try to incorporate all of it together, turn it into one shade. Right now, it's a couple of shades kind of sitting with each other, on top of each other, but it's not thoroughly mixed. So I'm mixing it first and see what I wind up with. Again, I don't need details back behind him. These are going to get fluted later on. So there is information in them. They're not flat. They are going to be broken up. But I think this, a bit more neutralized, and this being colorful actually works nicely. It is actually what's going on in the photograph. And so this falls more in line with that. And I'm also going to deal with the hair. Like, I don't want to leave the hair this way against the background. I'm going to put some of the gray in so that I can blend into the background, which will help to unify the head with the background, at least from the standpoint of the edges. The color and the value will be completely different, but the edges will be a soft blur. Again, I just let this stuff roll over into the hair. I'm actually pulling it down into the hair because I'm going to overwrite it. I'm just going to paint the grays right in on top. And so I want some of the background color in here, but at the same time, you know, it'll make it easier for me to take out this edge. If the gray goes right up to the edge and I'm pushing the gray out into the background, I'd rather have kind of going in both directions. So I get a little bit of this color kind of in here, and then I'll be able to marry the gray in kind of in on top of it. So. So I just want to step back and take a look, see where we are. Again, just impossible to see while I'm standing on top of it like this. So I'm having to make a decision now as to whether or not I think the gold is too dark. It's very colorful, but it's darker than I was originally planning. It's really kind of in line with the shades in the apron, which is not a bad thing, but I'm deciding whether or not it's okay. I'm now trying to envision where this is going to go, where I'm going to push the face, and how it's going to relate. I definitely like this. It's subtly different, but this has less kind of sting to it. My silence is me thinking, trying to work it out. Yeah, I think the background, I think dark as it is, I think it's actually okay. I don't have a problem with it. I'm going to pull some of this green and brown in here into the flag a little bit, so that at least on this side, the flag is unified in some areas with the background. And again, nothing too crazy, just a little bit, and just knock it down. Again, even this, pulling the background into the skin. I'm going to wipe away, but I don't mind having this background glaze roll over that edge. Be able to wipe all of it away that I don't want as I go. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to bring these things in and marry them. Let them just come together. So I want to get a little bit of my blue up in here. Adds a little bit more in the way of character. Makes this feel more like a gradient. That looks so rich. The color combination is really nice. All right, so I'm just going to pull this down and just let it dissolve. And I know this is going to be made darker, which will separate these two just a little bit more. this edge as well. And that helps to keep the viewer in here. Not that they're going to be kind of running off the canvas on this side, but that little bit of a darker edge certainly helps. Get a little bit darker up in here as well. And again, just kind of pull this down. Subtle, but there. Same here. Just a little bit. You know, we want it there, but we don't want it to look like we intentionally put it in to keep these things from kind of running off the canvas. So once they're done, we'll knock them down. Solidify this a little bit more. First, in the light. Just make sure that they dissolve. I don't want to have abrupt edges up in here. Just need the subtlest little bit of darker shade. Don't need to beat people over the head with it. There's some stuff in here that looks like marble. It's like marbleized. It's just how the paint went down, and I'm like working around it because I really like the way it looks and I want it to be in the final painting. Again, just gonna taking down all the paint that I overlapped, making sure all of the edges are soft, so that anything I accidentally maybe leave behind, that it looks married to the face. So that's looking as a background. Damn it. Gravity. I think that's looking pretty good. I want to just get some of the hair addressed. And I think I'm basically done with the background. I have a little bit of work to do down in this bottom corner down here. Very, very quickly, just to kind of match this with the rest of the painting. But this is actually feeling pretty good. I just want to get something in for the hair to better describe what's going on there. And again, nothing too crazy. I'm just a value, right? Really, it's just a value. I'll be able to build on it later on, but it's going to set the stage, I think, for what I'll do at the end. And so this is basically just a gray, and I put a little bit of that background brownish purple into it so that it feels like it's part of feels like it's part of the painting. It doesn't feel too removed. And again, I'm going to be able to glaze over and make it darker, stronger, more colorful, whatever it is I need later. This will do. Okay. So, and here just a little bit of gray. This is fine. Get it in here. All right, and remember, I'm actually going to be putting in white on top of this. So this isn't the end value. I'm just establishing some of the darker stuff. Some of the darker values that are in here. Some of them are already established. I pulled the background in to do that. Again, I am going to knock this down, so even the places I'm not filling are going to get some paint. But it should really kind of pull his head together nicely, where like at the moment, all this white makes his hair look like makes his head look larger. And so this is going to effectively kind of bring it back and give us a better sense of the shape of it. And again, that carryover from the background does a lot. It helps to, even though I'm putting this gray down, it helps to marry the head to the background. Just looking for landmarks, trying to make as much sense of these shapes as I can. I don't want the paint to be too wet and sloppy either. Good. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to knock it down, soften it a little bit. I don't think I want to take it down too much. I'm trying to leave some of what's going on in there, some of the movement alone. So this, I'm just going to kind of pull it into the face a little bit because I know I've got lots of like white hair that's going to go in there. Just kind of, I'm using this brush and I'm actually, you'll see, we'll come up close to it afterwards, but I'm actually leaving streaks behind that look like hair. And I will be wiping some of this stuff out, like away from the face once I'm done.
What kind of canvas are you using?
Clausen number 13. It's really my canvas of choice when I'm doing portrait. And that's a Belgian linen.
Becky said it looks so flat like a board.
The canvas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a quality linen. It's very fine. It's quadruple primed, which helps to eliminate texture. Right. All I'm doing now is just kind of lifting and blending some of this stuff. Not going too crazy with the blending. I want to leave as much texture as I can in place, and then I'll build on top of that texture later on. But you can see I'm giving the impression of hair, even at this point, just kind of flicking the brush through the paint, trying to create the impression of that pattern of movement. That way when I get to it later on and I'm putting all the highlights in, kind of the white hair on top of it, it's going to already have this as an underpinning. I'm not going to have to render every hair. I'll be able to hint in a more specific way on top of this, and what is down already, since it has some texture in it, will basically support any mark I put on top and further kind of make the argument that what you're looking at is hair. Right. And it doesn't have to be pushed that far at this point. Again, I am going to go back in and I am going to be rendering what is arguably individual hairs into this. So how far I push it right now, it's just a matter of, like for me, what I think I need. I want to get it to a point where I can feel like, well, you know what, if I left it like that, nobody would know that I was going to do more, right? I don't want to depend on everything to be managed in the next pass. And again, that's been a theme. That's been a theme through the entire process. Right? Don't leave anything for later on that could easily be handled right now, or would make the next pass easier, more direct, simpler.
Question from Sana.
Yes.
Does Evolve go through how to stretch canvas as well as this?
You know what? I haven't taught it yet, but it will be in there somewhere at some point. It's a very important skill, and you shouldn't be working on store-bought canvas like stretch canvas. That's definitely a no-no in my book. But yeah, I will eventually get around to a video on that as well. There's a lot of things that Evolve still doesn't have finished that we want to give away, right? And a lot of these things, they're not paid content. Like you buy into the program and they're not part of the program, but I think you should know them. And so we're gonna make videos to show them. Because you really, you know, if you're gonna make a painting, you shouldn't be going into a store. You do a painting like this, you don't go into a store and buy a pre-stretched canvas. Shame on you if you do. You should know better, but you should also know, you should know why you don't and how to make a proper canvas so that you're creating a painting that's gonna last. Like I already know this painting is gonna be in that room that it's going into for 100 years. It's gonna be in that room and then it's gonna be moved out. I know where it's gonna be in 101 years. It's gonna be being archived and moved out of a particular place. Like when I paint this, when I stretch this, the linen I use, the stretcher I use, the materials, they take into account that I know 100 years from now, this painting is still going to be displayed. It's not going to be in a closet somewhere. Like I have a sense of the life that I'm building here. And you have to take care with your materials, stretch canvas and all of that. when you're doing a project like this to make sure that you're treating it properly, that you're using materials that are going to stand up to that amount of time. And look, I mean, a proper linen should last, I mean, before it even requires any restoration work, hundreds of years. Cotton canvas starts to fall apart in about 50. Linen, you're talking a few hundred years before it starts to require care. And so you don't use cotton canvas, you use linen. And again, you know, even if you're doing a painting for somebody, a small $100 head and shoulders painting of somebody's child, why would you do it on something that the painting will be falling apart before that child is full grown? While they're, you know, during, like, so if you paint a 10-year-old kid, when they're 60, the painting that was painted of them will be falling apart. Why would you do that for the extra few dollars to put it on something that will still be in the same condition when their grandchildren have it? Like, to me, again, like we talk about, where do you spend your money? Don't spend it on your brushes, spend it on your paint, spend it on your canvas. The things that you're going to give away to the client or as a gift, put your money there. That way, what you produce endures.
Question from Becky. So you are doing individual hairs right now with a small round brush?
No, I'm using a fan brush and I'm not doing individual hairs. I am just lifting some of the glaze that I put down and giving the impression of some of the movement. Daniel will get close to this when I'm done so you can see it. But no, I'm not painting individual hairs. I'm really just kind of hinting at what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. And Sana said, she laughed, I used to stretch my own canvases because where I lived I couldn't get a hold of pre-stretched ones. But
Dodged the bullet there.
Yeah. But there's not that much bounce in this one. Sometimes when I'm watching videos, I almost get seasick from all the bounce I see in what the artists are painting on.
Well, look, this is tight as a drum. I mean, like if I turn off all this, there's no play in this at all. And I haven't opened up the corners yet. Before this goes to the client, I'll key out the corners, probably maybe 1/8 of an inch. And this thing will be like a snare drum. And that's how it'll be delivered. So
she said, whoa.
Yeah, when we stretch canvas here, it has the bong test. It's like bong. That's how you know that it's done right. They should be tight as a drum. But there's a way of stretching it. You can really kind of ruin a canvas if you don't stretch it properly. Just because it's tight doesn't mean it's stretched right.
She said, teach me, senpai.
Well, we will get there. We will get there. So here, all I'm doing is kind of rubbing down, I'm kind of wiping away and neutralizing the overlap. And I'm going to leave some of it in place, enough to kind of temper the edge where the background rolls over into the figure. Like, you won't see it, but the color is there, and it's going to help to marry the face to the background. I'll just clean it up a little bit as I go. A little here and a little there. Even this, I can soften the edge of the shirt against the background with it. You can see a little bit of carryover of the color into the tie, into the shirt. I'll wipe out anything that I think is a little bit over the top, or I'll leave it and then I'll over paint it, much like I'll do with the hair. And that'll help to keep some of these colors in place. And you can see I'm just manipulating the brush to get something, to get a, you know, a kind of an edge that works for me. But I don't mind that overlap. In fact, I like it. It adds a lot of atmosphere. Just a little bit And it doesn't feel like the background spilling over into the subject. It feels very natural because it's the background, it's the space, it's the environment this figure is in. And so all I'm basically doing is allowing the environment to be seen in the skin and its edges. Right, again, some of it I have to lift a little bit more than other places. The background is nice and wet, so it's taking a little bit of work to kind of dissolve edges. And again, this side, I'm not going to wear this hair. This is almost white in the photograph. All of this is so much white in here, and when I put that in, it's really going to jump. But for now, these are really good underpinnings. They're nice and neutral. They connect the head to the background. I'm only going to pull out what I think needs to be pulled out to finalize the hair. So I'm going to go around the inside and here. So that outer edge, done. I'm just going around the inner edge in here to make sure that I don't have anything that doesn't belong. Any marks that have kind of crept out as I was blocking in. But there's a lot of shadow cast down in here by the hair. So if I just soften the edge, this will hold the place of the shadow. All right, and just break the shape up. See, brush strokes that I don't want. Same in here. I'm just going to pull this in, and I'm going to let that edge stay just like that. I'm going to allow those. There's a lot of this background color covering this. Even back in here, just going to. Just make sure I'm not. You can see one of the really great lessons about this is that you're seeing what I'm doing is I'm crafting a painting. You know, so many demos when you're watching the artists, you just and they kind of like block them in and they do these studies, but the paintings aren't highly refined and finished. And so, in order to highly refine a painting, clean and tight like this, it requires getting in and getting really specific at some point. And that's what you see me doing right now, getting very specific. And obviously, the whole painting's not been done this way, but there are parts of the painting that absolutely need to be managed this way. Right, and so here, it's funny, I've been looking at this ear since the other day when I painted it. I'm really enjoying it. There's almost nothing here, but it really reads like an ear. So, just trying to pull out a few of these highlights on that outer ridge. So I'm actually thinking all I've got left is the bottom edge of this, and then I'm done. with my background. And I say done, I mean done is a relative term. I don't know when it'll actually be done, when it'll truly be finished. But once I get that in, I mean, I'm basically the entire background's now been covered and unified. Everything is all making sense together now. There's still work to be done, but I mean, this is basically it. Again, I'm gonna grab some of my background color and kind of pull it into the figure over here. And again, just try to connect him more to the background back here. This arm will pull forward, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of this hip kind of connected to the background. I did it on this side as well. So just, and again, just pull this in here. And again, making this vignette, this corner, even over the violet, just kind of pull this up. I'll grab a little bit of blue, drop it into the corner as well. And then just knock it down. Let's just spill this up into the sleeve a little bit. When I drop in my shadow later on that, it'll be gone. But again, it doesn't hurt to overlay it. Make sure there's no distinct edge, that it just kind of carries over. And again, you know, this is being pulled into here, just unifying everything, making it all feel like it's part of the same thing. Under the same light, breathing the same air. We'll break these things up when I put in all my lights, all my details. These things are going to break up a little bit. And again, when you're looking at the painting as a whole, this edge, this going into this, you're not even going to notice it. There's going to be details in here and in here. You're only seeing it because you're seeing me do it. But if you weren't here watching me do it, you'd never even know that it had happened. And I want this corner where this comes down to absolutely disappear. No edge in there would be nice. Just let the jacket dissolve into the corner. I feel like Bob Ross. We just put a happy tree right here. I actually feel that way sometimes. Not the happy tree stuff, but like I hear myself and I'm like, that sounds like Bob Ross. So I want to make sure I'm not leaving an abrupt edge in here, because I know that I'm going to glaze on top of this to push the sleeve back, to put black in. And so if there's a really big jump where this shade is overlapping this, when I do the glaze, it's just going to become even more pronounced. So I want to make sure that I don't leave anything that is a discernible edge. I want the color to roll over, but not have the edge. Good, and I think that's it. Yeah, wow, it's really pulling together nicely. He's got such prominence in that space. The depth is maintained. The darker values around his head have now pushed him forward. The background is unified. It feels like one space. It is a bit darker than the photographs, but everything that's supposed to be there is now in. Nothing's been left out. And it's just a matter of a change in the values of some things, but those value choices have made him much more prominent and added an elegance to the painting that the photograph didn't have. And again, I'm not done. There's still stuff to be done. The flag isn't finished. We're going to be pulling that flag forward a little bit. It's still a little soft, and I wanted to have a greater presence than that. He's got to be glazed. He's not done. His face, as solid as it looks, not even close to completion. But you can get a sense. And again, like for everybody who's been who's been here from the beginning, at no point have I really rolled up my sleeves and started slaving. But look at all the details. The details, this stuff is arguably the most detailed thing in the painting. And it was a bunch of dots, a bunch of strokes, right? Kind of relaxed the whole way. I haven't gone in and rendered the way that most people think you would have to in order to bring this to life. And trust me when I tell you, you think this face looks good and real now. When I get the glazing on this, I haven't even put the eyes in yet. Those are the original shades that I put in. There's nothing there, right? Same with the mouth, I've barely done anything. What happens when I start putting in that cornea? When I put in the reflected quality of the light in his cornea, and I put in his iris, and it's nice and dark like his jacket. What do you think that's going to look like? The reds on his nose, right? Like all of those things, the red in his cheeks. This is going to come to life in a big way. Yeah, so you can see the hair. Not a lot going on. It's mostly just paint sitting there with a couple of streaks through it. All the details will go in on top, and all those prominent lights, what we think of as white, will go in later on. They'll be grays, but they'll look white in this environment. So I've got one other thing I just noticed when I step back. So this snare runs across and comes out over here. So I've got to establish that. I want to make sure that it feels like that's a step and that it runs the whole length of the space. So I just need to get a height for it and make sure that I'm placing it properly. And again, it doesn't need to be much, simply that we can see the edge. I just wanted to do that. I'm going to do the bottom one as well. And so it helps to unify this tiny little corner with what's going on here. Like, we don't think about it, but our brain will make that connection that fast. It'll know that there's something missing over here. Or that when it sees these marks, it'll immediately connect them to these and even this. So putting them in is important. And again, they don't have to be very much. They just need to be enough to make sense of the connection. I don't want to have anything over here that's going to really draw the eye. So subtle like that is enough. Right, you may not even be able to see it. I actually don't know. But,
It's showing up.
yeah, but very subtle. Doesn't need much more. And Now I'm done. For the day. So tomorrow, what are we gonna do tomorrow? Hopefully,
How about the gold?
this. Yeah, maybe we'll do this tomorrow. We'll see. I'm imagining that this is all gonna be wet tomorrow based on the experience we've had these last few weeks. But also, maybe possibly tomorrow, depending on what we're doing, maybe even the jacket. Pushing in those darks on the jacket will dramatically alter the painting. Yet again, big change in the painting, right? He looks real prominent against this, but when I drop blacks in here, he is going to absolutely jump. He's, right now, I know you can see all the ins and outs, but when I put those darks in, it's going to establish so much more dimension in the jacket, making really kind of rounding him out, much like I did up in here, where I pulled these things and I created some form. When I put those darks in the jacket is going to take on a lot more form. He's going to feel, he's like a balloon right now, the jacket without a lot of air in it. We're going to fill that balloon with air, but we're going to do it by establishing those edges. So tomorrow, we'll see where things are. But I know I've got the book and I've got the jacket that have to be knocked out. There really is just about time. There's not much left. And then I've got to get the details in here. So we'll see. We'll see how I feel tomorrow when I get up, which stuff is the best fit for me, the way I'm feeling tomorrow. Like I said, as I get down towards the end of paintings, I'm now looking at like getting into these like this nitty gritty, and so to some degree, like I'll be in the mood for one thing one day and not on another. And of course, at some point, it doesn't matter if you're in a mood or not. You got to get the work done. But right now, I've got detail work, arguably detail work, and I've got kind of, this is not really details. It's a few marks. I've got to create a bit of a torn edge, a tattered edge. I've got some lettering to do in here. And the jacket is kind of bulk work. But I'm coming down to almost nothing but detail work. So I got to see if I'm in the mood for detail work tomorrow. I'll jump in. I'll probably try to tackle this. I have a real feeling that this is going to be the last thing done in the painting. I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting, not intentionally, but it's found itself being put off over and over and over across the process, and which is terrible. It should have been done. It should really be done up to this level right now, and it's not. But I have a feeling the entire painting will be finished, and then I'll have to sit down and spend a day doing just this. I've got a gut feeling. So, but anyway, so we are looking good. We're looking good. I'm very, very happy with where we got today. Got a lot done. So, any questions? Does anybody have a question before we pack it in for the day? Take that as a no. Okay.
Frank says thank you.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody. We're back here again tomorrow at noon Eastern Standard Time. And get the next thing going. Again, I'm not really sure what it is, but I'll figure it out tonight. Get that next thing going. And like I said, we should be finished with this painting next week. We'll definitely be finished next week. So, see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.